Hello.
He
Good
knows.
afternoon, everyone.
Ari knows.
This is quite
Very
the
strong.
most easiest way to talk because I got the lights in front of
Oh.
my eyes. I hardly see the public, but I'm gonna make it. So thank you for coming. My name is Ari Gautier. I'm a French writer, mostly historical fiction writer. So I've been asked to moderate this discussion, and I didn't know why in the first place. And I said yes without even knowing what I was getting into. And normally I'm sitting on the other side when I've been asked question. So this is the first time I'm going to ask question because often I happen to ask myself when I go to panel or conversation, oh, what a stupid question this is. So for the first time I want to be on the other side and trying to find out what is there to ask question. Because asking question is very difficult. Answering sometimes can be very easy. So I'll try to ask some intelligent questions. And if not, please let me know this is a stupid question. Straight
Too
away.
intelligent.
So at least I can correct myself. So I'm happy to have in this panel some interesting people. I have Susanne. Susanne Blom Bussoli from Museum Network, from Moderna Museum. I have
No. Susanne Procopé Ilmonen. It's from the Åland Islands Art Museum.
okay, see,
Yeah, sorry.
we're already messing up. So good. So second, I have Jeannette Ehlers, visual artist from Copenhagen, and I have Martina Marti from Finland, from Culture for All, and I have Nina
Yes.
from Moderna Museum.
Yes.
Exactly. And then I have Johnston from Oslo Metropolitan University, and last, Mr. Lars-Ole Vestergaard from Cultural School Network. So the challenge is when we talk about programming and offering, because I work for the Mela Cultural Institution, which works for the empowerment of minority through arts and culture, and also to a better visibility of people from migrant background. And mostly what happens, we are really focused of, in our programming, mostly to have as many as artists from minority background. That's what we are meant for, and that's what we do. So I'm quite interested because I come from a very French background, where French was a colonial imperial power for a long time, which still doesn't acknowledge the multiculturalism of France because it's still very monoculture. Because of that's what the Republic wants to us to understand, that we are not a diverse culture. So by moving to Norway, so I thought the Scandinavian model, which has been branded as one of the best in the world, how does it work? And even though I'm quite new in the business, I found out very soon that is just a myth. And it takes time. Not only it takes time, second, it takes also willingness to understand multiculturalism and to embrace the minorities. And I don't know if they are on the right path, but I can see there are some signs of improvement, but that's not enough. That's not enough because I see artists that I meet quite often, local artists from minority background who are still struggling for the last 40 years. So 40 years, it's a long time. Even though we can agree that, okay, you guys came, it takes 10 years for you to establish as an artist, and maybe the 30 years you can have a good life. But no, I can see a guy like Sankun from Gambia, 40 years he still does have a place to play. So the only place where these guys can play, it's a place like Mela Usa, which is run by people of color, for people of color. But the other institutions doesn't have neither the capacity or the understanding of include these people. And sometimes I'm even often surprised, and even sometimes, I mean, it's irony. Sometimes I've been called, people calling me from various cultural institutions, when they want to program someone, a people of color, they call Mela Usa. Oh, do you have a black artist who can play kora? Do you have a tabla artist who can play this and this? So why? What do you mean? You guys don't have a kind of list or either a repertoire of what type of artists are in this country, or even in a small city like Oslo. So that's really, I'm surprised that people don't have the knowledge of artists from minority background living in the city who are struggling to perform, to be visible, and to make their life. So my question will be mostly around the programming. What is your strategy? How do you program, and everything? And I will start by saying that the Nordic cultural models have been widely discussed since long time. The Nordic culture model issued in 2003 focus on the power of welfare policy, tradition of strong involvement by public institutions and cultural institutions. We can agree that to a certain extent that theoretically local and regional administrations and institutions are inclusive, but the ground reality show that this is a bit exaggerated. So I will start my question with Jeannette by asking, do the Nordic capitals' cultural policies mirror the objectives of the public state policy?
Oh, wow. I can't speak for all the capitals because I'm
you
from
don't have
Copenhagen.
to.
So,
You don't have to.
do you mean if it represents the society?
Yes.
No, not at all.
No.
No. I mean, it's very obvious that we still have a lot of work to do. It's still very white, although there has been progression a little bit over the last maybe 5 years or so, but it's still very white, and it's still like our institutions are mostly, I mean, not mostly, but it is completely white managed. I was recently appointed the chairwoman of what is it called, Committee of Grants in the Danish Arts Council, which I really appreciate, of course. But I guess I'm the first black woman to be in that position, which is, of course, a progress. But I will also be the only one. There's another POC in another board, which is, of course, great, but we're not in the same board. So, yeah. But apart from that, to my knowledge, it is very white and Eurocentric still.
Yeah, that is true, because recently I had an artist from New York who came to perform at Mela Usa, and I think she's either she must be Indian or Pakistani, but she was amazed that for the first time she's been touring all over Europe or even in the States, that she came to an organization run by brown people for brown people or people of color. So I can understand your statement saying that mostly it's white institution run by white people, but I'm sure there are also some concern among this institution to be more inclusive. Lars, if you can have certain of word about that, really appreciate.
Yes, of course I can. Just to talk about the politicians. In my hometown, Aarhus, I think the local government really mirrors the society. We have a chairman of the cultural and citizen department who is from Palestine, and he's very keen on trying to make the cultural politic and the cultural contributions to the citizens open for everybody. But of course, there's still a lot to be done because we are a lot of old white men sitting on the boards, and we talk much about how to do it, but every time we talk about it, it's almost the same people who talk, and that's of course a problem. But we have a clear political demand that we should open up and make a better city and a better cultural life for everybody. That's a demand, so we have to find ways, and we're doing that many different ways all over Denmark. And in my music school, where I'm the manager, we made I think it was a good idea, because I had the vice president of the school in my hometown was from India. He was raised in Tanzania and educated in England and married to a Danish lady. So he brought in the multicultural dimension to our music school, and we started what we call World Music Center 20 years ago to make a special stage for those with a different cultural background to have a place to perform and show their art. And we took them into the public schools and showed that although you come with different cultural backgrounds, you still could be a role model for young people. And the main problem, I think, for many of us is that when we talk about the old cultural ways of doing things, my music school is more than 80 years old, it was always somebody who paid to get some education. And this trading business is not always the way the new citizens see on music or culture. So we have to find ways where we can work with that dimension. And then, of course, we also have a problem with the employed. Those we have had hired for many years, they know the tradition and they want to continue the tradition, so we have to work on that too. But I think in our network, I think we have seen good examples of how to bring the doorstep down and even make it free to come to and participate. And we have to work also with the organization. Maybe what we think is the right way, 1 time a week, 2 times a week, and in a group or solo, is not the way but that's not even something that is about to be special for the colored people. It's for all people, because I think also it's important to say many of us sitting here are representing institutions who only serves 10% of the population. So we have to open up for everybody, not always talking about those with the color, but I think it's also other different things that makes it more difficult to enter our institutions.
Yeah, that's why I want to ask the next question to Jamie. Is it enough just to program people from minority background, people of colors, or do you think that having people on key positions in institution is important?
Both. We in the library profession unfortunately do not always mirror the diversity in our communities. And what that really means for the librarians is that they need to develop relationships with various groups in the community to ensure that they know that they are welcome at the library. Libraries are open to everyone, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone feels at home in the library. And so it's the role of the librarians to go out and reach out, to connect, and to develop and nurture those relationships. And that's very much what we've been talking about here in our network, is how do we do that? And it means engaging. These are new competencies for librarians. We're used to cataloging things, putting things on shelves. That's the old traditional way of doing libraryship. Now it's about going out to the communities. It's engaging and bringing the communities into the libraries, facilitating discussion, bringing in various perspectives. So this is very much the work now within libraries, and very much what we're seeing within the networks. And we exchange best practices within our network, and I think that's very exciting. We need these networks to learn from one another. What worked for you? How do you do this? How do you achieve this? How do you develop those relationships? Because libraries are legally required in all municipalities within the Nordic countries. There are library laws that mandate it. So libraries are everywhere, pretty much. Any community you go into, you'll find a library. And as these librarians who are part of the network go back to their local libraries and participate in conferences and their local networks, these best practices then can be shared, and the impact can be very great. But we need to work on it, and it's something that we very much have to be cognizant of. one thing we practiced within the network was active listening to make sure that we're not, of course, at the beginning you might try to see what works, what people are interested in, but it's also about hearing from them. What are they interested in? What can we do? How can we be relevant to their needs and their interests? And so it's about listening. And we develop those skills also to make sure that we are engaging in constructive and productive ways with our populations.
So, being a literary person, I was a writer, so I'm interested in what you're saying about libraries and books and this and that. But when you put books in the shelves, what type of literature do you put?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you put literature which talk to me? Or does it talk to only one segment of people?
And that is part of it too, is bringing in for collection development different perspectives and finding out what's of interest for groups, various groups to read. And the beauty with libraries is that we can provide literature in mother tongue, in various groups' mother tongue, which is very important. But it also comes down to how we display it even. Do we put it in the back, in that back corner that's not very attractive, or do we put it out front? And so that's also a lot of what we've discussed, is how can we make that space inviting and welcoming, and that simply having books in a particular language up front and not in the back can be the difference there between if it's a welcoming space or not.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'll go to the next subject because I divided the session in a different subject. I'm like awareness, for example. And so Nina maybe, Nina, isn't it?
Mm?
Nina.
You're
Nina?
talking to me? Yeah. My
So
name is Nina.
how does it, how do you create awareness in your programming? When you plan, when you program artists, what do you have back in your mind?
Oh, but I hope you have the right information about what I'm doing at the museum.
Yeah,
I'm not the one that are doing this at the museum. My role is art educating at the art educating department. So I'm not the one responsible for bringing in different artists. Unfortunately, I'm not one.
So so how do you?
Or did I misunderstood
No,
the
no,
question?
no, that's fair.
No?
So what do you do actually as for the programming and offering? So
I have been working for almost 2 years with collaboration with a group called International Acquaintances to create a space, a kind of workshop, art workshop, but also a language workshop for people who don't speak Swedish or want to learn more Swedish, of course, from all over the world. And they can come and join and talk about art, but not only about art, because art have so lot in common with life and everything. And my role there is not to be the art educator in that sense. I have to listen very much to them, I think, and to hear what they have to say about art and create a good discussion where everyone feel that they can be listened to, of course, and that I'm not the one who has the correct analysis about artwork. And afterwards we have been painting and doing sculptures in our workshop area, and it has been very successful, and it's a very good way, I think, to bring people who shouldn't come to the museum and feel welcome in a friendly room and a friendly way, I think.
No, because when we talk about museum, mainly art museum, when you see in a very Marxist perspective, like John Berger came with a series of the ways of seeing. So every artwork has been analyzed because art has all been seen as something very bourgeois, and which is not accessible to the common people. So it's quite interesting that you create that awareness, that accessibility to common people, that art or visual art or mainly paintings. Because when we talk about art, for a long time it has been only paintings.
Yes.
Only now we have the different, what do you call, tools
Yes.
to express ourselves.
Yes.
I'm sure.
Different media.
Different
Media,
media,
yes.
exactly. Different media to
Yeah.
express the artistical expression.
Mm.
So it's quite interesting that you open up
Yeah.
that bourgeois stereotype
Yes.
to commoners. So it's,
Yes.
it's quite interesting.
And I can also say that we have a huge rehanging right now, and we have a lot of artists that not has been presented in our collection, like Adrian Villarrochas, Frida Oropabo, and that is very good, I think, also when I have people from all over the world come. So it's not only the white men from Western Europe and United States that are represented at the museum. So it's much easier to talk, of course, with this kind of rehanging that we have nowadays.
So the next question is to Martina. Do you have any specific inclusive strategies in your programming?
Yeah, I'm working for an organization called Culture for All, and we're offering support to cultural institutions. We work a lot with museums, theaters, orchestras. We also have some cooperation or exchange with libraries, so it's all very familiar what you're talking about. And yes, we when we work with them, we do deal with this issue of programming, of course, and we do have some strategies that we try to develop with the institutions. I think in all aspects regarding diversity within the arts and culture field, we cannot go by the one key issue, and that's recruitment. And wherever there is money flowing, because the institutions are very important, because they are in our sector the ones that offer employment. So and then we have usually a big free independent scene, and they apply for money and funding, and so there's also money flowing. But wherever there's a possibility to decide who is creating art, cultural content, this is where we need to develop a kind of a thinking of diversity. And I really liked what was said earlier this morning, that there's not a diverse people. It's the diversity is between us. So it has, but we have to also point out these aspects that make certain people more included than others, and where the exclusion really happens. And that's why I think it is very relevant to talk about people of color, or about able bodies, or what are the faces that we see in the cultural field at large, but also in institutions. But when we talk about these strategies, yeah, I think for me, I'm working a lot with cultural diversity, and with particularly from the point of view of artists and culture workers. So for me, the first step is always we need to get diversity in the workforce, the people on all the levels of the institutions. It's useless to think about how we can get more diverse audiences if we don't have diverse arts institutions. But these are slow processes, but many arts institutions are quite big, so there's always recruitment going on, and everyone can make these, can do something towards inclusion. Also white men, there's a lot we're talking about an assumed white man. This is also a myth, but everyone can do something towards that, I think. But then I think it's really important to also think, when we have more diverse people working in our institutions, which already is a bit of a dream still, how do we keep people there? What is the work environment? How do I also in my work with institutions sense a lot of what's the word, dissatisfaction. People are not feeling very well in their work. So how can we create work environments where people can actually be creative and do their work well and like to work? So it's not just oh, let's recruit some people of color and then we're more diverse. There's no quick fix. It requires a bigger cultural change, and I think that makes it really difficult.
Yeah, because in many ways, because we think that sometimes we people of colors we have to fill a kind of quota system. We are here, so like for example in a working place, as you said, it's good to have one black guy, one brown guy, one yellow guy. So, we show diversity, but showing diversity on a visual way, it's not what their contribution. I think their contribution is more important, just being just a kind of a visual effect. When people come and visit you, oh yeah, you say we have a black guy appointed. He's good, but but it doesn't have any power. It's just sitting down there. So I think at a time, even I can throw comment dire en français, throw the stone in the mud. Even Kulturrådet in Norway, I don't see any black people. I'm sorry to say that. And even they are there just as a piece of decoration. They don't have power, or even they have power, they won't stay for long. So how do you think we can change this mentality by saying, okay, we have some quota, filling quota, but you don't have a saying on any kind of decision. Susanne, do you have anything to say about that? Do you want to say something about it?
Yes,
though it's not a question.
Of course, on the Åland Islands, it's a bit too small community. So you can do quite much actually. Of course, the board and the board. We have one Najab is in our board. But of course, we should be some more people who also in the staff. Yes, definitely. Yes.
But it's about power, as you say. I mean, it's about giving up your power. So are you willing to do that? Really reflect on that. Are you willing to give up your seat for someone else? So when it comes down to it, it's about that.
Yeah, it's a very privileged, what they call, I mean, it's very common now to use the white privilege, which sometimes can be seen as something insulting, but let's say as bad as bad, it's white privilege, where you don't want to give your power. So, Lars, please.
Yes, of course, we have to be very aware of how to setting up the numbers of employed and how we make all the levels in our institutions. But I'd be very afraid of talking about democracy, trying to have a certain number of people in our board elected by people. So I think we should, in my country, I will go for it. We should be very democratic, and if we have strong persons with different background, of course they will get to the level. We see it already. Not much. I mentioned that in my city, probably not so much in our government, but I think it will come. The next year would show if they have the potential and they have the will, those who want to have the power. I think we can support them by voting on them, but I don't think we should make any quotes in the government.
But again, like we were talking about earlier today, who decides what is quality is again a question here. Who decides what is valid and which perspectives are valid, If you still have only whiteboard, that's still the main perspective, right? So there needs to be some kind of a reckoning with that from within.
Yes.
I also think it's really important to talk about professional recognition, and that's a big problem, especially when we're talking about professionals who come from outside the Nordic countries or outside of Europe. and how do we recognize their professionality and their expertise. So we need to kind of really challenge also what we think is an expert. And this I find this a bit problematic. The people who are good they will make their way up. Well, actually, there's a lot of really good people who have not made their way up because there is structural exclusion. So I'm really backing you on this, I don't know, because I think art schools are really, really crucial. We also need to, if we want to have diversity in the workforce, we also need to educate a diverse group of people. And I don't know. I know at Quota they raise different feelings, but somehow I think for art schools actually quotas could be a really good measure. And I think also for arts institutions, I think there should be at least targets. And I think there's also a role of funding institutions, and I think also the funding institutions have to show an example. So it's really everywhere. And we have to have these targets. It's not enough anymore that we say, oh yeah, we do this and that, and we think about it, and if they are good, we will see them. It's like you were saying, people call you when they need an excellent performer. Why do they not have the network? Why do they not go and see and have that knowledge of their scene? Because it's part of their professional job. Yeah, it's their job. Yeah.
I think that's very problematic because the people don't have the networks, and so we talk about quotas, okay. It comes down to the quality of the relationships. And when we talk about the shifting of power, if we have a good relationship, I'm not going to be above you. Yeah, your opinion will be equal to mine. We can discuss things and decide, is this of quality or is this not? And how do we go about things? And so it really comes down to, yes, making sure that we're inclusive and we're bringing everyone in, but that there's good quality relationships, both within the institutions and outside. We reach out to various groups, but those are relationships, and we value them as relationships. And that's what we're seeing in libraries. That is the key to success often, is the quality of the relationships that we can maintain within and without.
Yeah, but it comes to exactly what Jeannette says, but quality, it's a very interesting subject. Who define quality? I mean, as a curator, art curator, it's the most undemocratical work because I'm sitting here judging like 5-6 artists, and suddenly I say, oh, you are good, I'm going to curate you. And what about the 4 others? So first of all, curating should be out. It's a very passé thing. So we should stop curating. And the curator, go jobless, please. Go jobless. Curating is bad. So that's why I say, who are we to judge? Who are we to say this is better than the other? So when we talk about quality, we should be one has to be very careful about quality.
And also, I mean, I don't understand your comment because, I mean, you can have a very good relationship, but still, you know, someone has the higher position. Someone has
the sharing of power too, though. Yeah, I mentioned that in the beginning, the sharing of power, but it's also, it's about a relationship of respect. It's about ensuring that there is...
That should be obvious.
I
would say.
No, but I think sometimes it doesn't happen in practice.
The structure is still meant for someone and not for someone else.
I think, though, if we can start establishing relationships and start a dialogue and begin there, I think that we can then, that change can happen. That it's the structures, yes, we have to tackle those structures, definitely. What can we do here today, right now? And that is then the dialogue, that is the interaction, that is working together.
That's part of it, but I think it comes, when it comes down to it, there needs to be done something radical.
Absolutely.
Until it really sinks in.
So what would that...
Well, giving up power, for instance, one of the things. Having more people of color in high positions, giving them the tools or the right to decide what is, you know, quality, or also what is also quality, you know, and give,
When we're looking in libraries, I teach library science. And so what we're looking at is how can we shift that power, and in what ways, and in what areas? Is it For example, do we bring people in to help with the collection development to make sure that it's more representative of the different perspectives? Or do we, we would like more people of various backgrounds in the profession. Right now it's dominated by women from the majority group. So we have to think of what we can do here and now today to make it inclusive and work towards the goal of professionally being more inclusive. So it is, there is a lot of that discussion now about how we shift that power, but it's also making sure that we're in contact with the groups, that we reach out, that we establish dialogue and relationships with these groups to be able to then find out how can we work together, how can we shift that power, how can we create inclusive arenas in which your voices, you represent yourself within the library. So that is, and there's a lot of implications for practice and lots of questions. How do we do this? And, what degree shifting of power can be, just maybe having some input. It can be handing over the space, saying, do what you want with it.
So do you speak with the groups about this, or is it something that you discuss within your own group? How you shift the power?
Within libraries, you're going out into the community. You're talking to people in the community, so various groups in the community. You're working with them. That's how that goes forth. And so then it's what is needed, what is of interest, how can we then bring the voices in, and how can we make the library space inclusive that way. And it's an area that we're working with. Libraries have been very top-down historically. So this challenges us, and this is a lot what's being discussed within the network. How can we achieve this? I think it's developing. It's definitely got a long way to go. I agree with you on that. And it is, though, there is that discussion. How can we shift the power?
Can I just quickly say about the libraries, because it was very important what you were saying, that you have a legal obligation as libraries, and I'm not so familiar with the library sector, but I have some examples from Finland, and I think some of the libraries have really understood this much more than in other art fields, I think. But this legal obligation is for all arts institutions. There is a legal framework in the Nordic countries that obliges all arts institutions to be for everyone. So, and we can define this for everyone as to be very inclusive, and this is a legal obligation. We have to be very clear. It's not about choice. It's not that we can say we want to or not.
And can I interrupt you? Sorry. The legal obligation I was referring to is that libraries, every municipality is required to offer library service. And so libraries are very widespread in that sense. Yeah.
But yeah, library service in your municipality. So you need to know what your municipality looks like, what languages are spoken, so that you can actually do this, fulfill this legal obligation. And this brings you back to then questioning what competences do we have? Are we competent to provide these services in the languages that are spoken, for example, in our community? And then this brings you back to your recruitment and your requirements. And I think this is maybe the other arts field could learn a little bit from libraries. I think some libraries are already
some,
and there's maybe some examples.
And we are used very heavily by people with immigrant backgrounds. So that is something that we see both in the research and in practice, that people with immigrant backgrounds tend to use the libraries more as meeting places, more than just the collections. And so this is a wonderful opportunity to connect with various groups, because many of them already come to us and we have daily contact. And that's a very wonderful thing. It's something that we're developing, and this is what the network is really focusing in on, is how we can develop this and to make it to facilitate discussion, to facilitate the bringing in of different perspectives, and to bring about greater awareness of the diversity in the community in a very positive light.
Yes, no.
It's interesting about the libraries because they are also free. It's free for everybody. So maybe this could be one of the arenas for the future artwork spaces.
Yes.
Because now people from all parts of society want to go to the library. They not all of them want to go to the theater or to the museum or to the art school. So probably if we open up in the library, we could start teaching working in the libraries, making small workplace. I've seen that already.
Yes,
We
yes, you
talk
have a
about that.
beautiful library in Aarhus.
We have a beautiful
And
library.
libraries they're bringing in music, they're bringing in art, they're bringing in theater. So this is a possibility for collaboration across sectors. And it's one that I hope that will happen because libraries are not just these warehouses for, quiet warehouses for books. They're open and they're for discussion. And so this is an exposure to the various arts.
Yes, I just can say that right now in Sweden we have free entrance to the governmental museums. So we have free entrance, for example, too. So that's why it's so fun, so great to take people there at this workshop that I have been.
Yes, sir.
Well, I think also we need to remember that we are working in a political system. So I think this is also important to tell the politicians that if they want to have change in the way we are running our institutions, it may give some noise. And my politicians are afraid of noise. So if I tell them I want to use more of my money into the public schools, and then I don't want to teach piano for all the rich parents in the suburbs, they say, what's going to happen? Yeah, then they'll complain. They'll write in the paper that the government is taking down music lessons, and can't we do anything else? They say, because if I really want to make change, I have to make sure that I'm totally in balance with the political system always, or I'll get cut. So we have to talk to the politicians, try to explain what we see, how it fits with their visions, and what consequences it has if we don't get more money, because it's also about money. Where do we put the money? If we take money from one place to another place, somebody's always getting angry.
But then again, we are also facing the other side of the problem, because when it gets free, people don't appreciate. When it's free, say, okay, why is it free? So must be bad quality. So people appreciate only when they have to pay something. When they pay something, they feel like, okay, I'm getting something. But when it's free, nobody comes. I'm talking through experience, because Mela Institution is one institution where 90% of the activities are for free, and it's for open public, and we strongly believe that the taxpayers' money should go back to them through art and culture. But when it makes free, nobody wants to showing up, because you say, okay, why is it free? I mean, big artists like Richard Bona coming for free. We have only 90 people. Why is that? So can someone explain me? I mean, I'm naively asking you.
Maybe it's because he's not relevant for them, because they don't know him. They haven't any connection, because that's also a very important thing about relevance. For who are we doing this? Are we relevant for those we ought to
No, I'm not talking
collaborate?
about. I mean, this is Richard Bona.
I know
he's
Richard Bona very well.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not only targeted towards certain community or other. It's open public for everyone. I mean, so.
It sounds
Yeah, exactly.
I will come next time.
So
Let us know.
yeah, you were saying, Susan.
No. I just said it.
But of course, it's always a kind of balance, because in the tradition of the Nordic cultural schools, it's quite expensive. Even mostly, I think in Denmark it's very expensive. They pay about 5,000 Danish kroner for a half-time lesson for a year. And although it doesn't sound much to some, it's still for some families it's quite a lot of money. Then we have some deductions, and we try to reduce the money. But that's where we're talking about how to spend the money. So we have to find solutions where we can use more new ways of teaching, perhaps. Maybe courses, maybe using the internet. We have had a wonderful success with some Danish small children's songs on the net, so it was accessible for everybody. And a lot of people have. Actually, I think that every child in Denmark has seen these cartoons with all the Danish songs at least 20 times, from 0 to 10. Every child. So that's also another way to try to find new ways to use the internet. It's free and they can go to it.
So my next question will be to Susanne. It'll be more about diversity. What kind of actual programs, initiative you have put in place in order to meet diversity, different ethnicities and backgrounds?
Yes, the Åland Art Museum, we had launched a new exhibition space in the permanent exhibition. It's quite small, but it's quite good space, and we will have there will be four exhibitions every year, and two of these exhibitions will be for an artist who is coming from abroad, and now we had the Angelo Perez from Chile, who has come from Chile to Barcelona, and then to Sweden, and then to Åland, and his artwork is like a journey of these places, and it was very rewarding, of course, and challenging also to create and to show his artworks, and it's and the public was very thought that it was really good because the story his story was so good, and also the artworks, and we will do that for you probably 2 years now, and then we will look at if we'll continue, but I think we will continue, and the staff also was it was really good also for us to of course we had difficulties with language barriers, and then we had to create not actually create, because he had he had a lot of he wanted to do the exhibition, he had a very good vision, but maybe we took some more we had more time for him, and it was really rewarding for us, I think. Yes.
Does anyone want to say about the same question about diversity and ethnicity background in your programming?
Oh, no, I don't need a microphone, sorry. Automatically the hand goes. Yeah, I think it's really, now we're talking about programming, but actually we need to step a little bit back, and I think in order to incorporate this kind of thinking about diversity in the programming, we need a certain awareness, and we need certain, let's call them diversity competences. That you were already talking about white privilege, so being aware of the privileges that certain people have and certain people don't have, and when we talk about ethnicity and the background, cultural background of an artist. We also really need to deal with the question of stereotypes and of racialization, and we need to be aware what do these terms mean, and what do they mean in our context. And actually, in our sector, I think in all the art fields, there is racialization going on. It's not just in theater, where it's maybe the most obvious, but it's also in music. What kind of bodies are allowed to produce, what kind of knowledge, or are expected to produce, what kind of knowledge, what kind of art. And I think this, especially in programming and content production, we really need to consciously work against that, to break down stereotypes and to break down that, because it's kind of there's a danger that we go back again into this tokenism, and now we have the ethnic artist, and the ethnic artist does ethnic art, and well, artistic freedom should be for everyone to do the art that they do, and also to be able to put that into a context. It was a very good example this morning of what art is art and what art is ethnic art. So I think this is very important in programming.
But I think, I think Jeannette can share some experience, because as an artist, how would you, what is your accessibility to art in Denmark, for example?
To museums and
Yeah, museums, yeah, or art galleries, or.
I mean, it varies a lot. I don't believe that the galleries, it's not my experience that the galleries are very open towards issues like we're talking about today, and to just include non-white art in their presentations. But I mean, I've experienced some institutions that open up and want to take these dialogues, at least try, and also invite you for, not especially for what I mean, for the discourse that you make, or they have different exhibitions that deal with other topics in which your topic also can be included. So I've dealt with that, but when it comes to galleries, like profit galleries and stuff like that, it's harder.
It's harder.
Yeah. And I guess it's because
because you're not a selling element, or.
I do well, but
Yeah, I know that's.
but I think
Of course you do well.
but I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I'm happy that I do well because then I can, I can kind of gain from it myself, of course. But there must be some kind of assumption that stuff like I do, and I'm not the only one, of course, that it's not really sellable, or
maybe it's too touchy.
Maybe it's too touchy. Maybe it's too political,
Absolutely.
which is also very political to say.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know, because I haven't really been discussing it. Like, I've tried sometimes, maybe in a very frank way, which wasn't really received well. Anyway, I don't know what it is, but I feel that there's a lack of engagement.
Yeah, like this morning, Kamara was doing a beautiful piece about uncomfortable conversation. So I think when it comes like artists like Jeannette, like Kamara, who are very open and even, talk about problems we don't want to talk. So maybe they are also not part of a programming because it's too touchy or it's too sensitive, or we just want to sweep it under the carpet to say, okay, we don't want this kind of artists because they are too controversial. So how do you deal with this kind of problematic artist?
Well, I think giving room for discussion too. I mean, I'm very curious, when you perform, is there room for discussion, or?
Sometimes it depends on the situation, the venue, yeah.
So with the libraries, and that's something that we offer, and we often bring up topics that can be quite challenging, with the point that this is for discussion, this is for the exchange of ideas, and I think that for libraries, it's often about the information aspect. It's informative. This is a perspective. This is someone representing themselves and their experience, and opening up for that discussion. And so I think that is something that sometimes I've seen. I think other like museums and archives do well, but they don't always have that ability to facilitate that.
And I would say that when I have discussions or Q&As after some of my performances, I feel the need and the urge from people. They really want to discuss, and they are very engaged, and so I feel that would be something that one should do more often. But as you say, sometimes it's not possible because of the venue or the program that is, so it's not always, and that's also what the art is for. I mean, it's to make these dialogues, to create these dialogues, discussions, and stuff like that. So yeah, so I agree. We should do more of that.
Yes, Lars.
In many of the areas I'm working, you need to have a kind of task. You have to be able to do something, play, or it's a kind of håndværk,
Technique.
handwork, and need. And to get that, you have to work hard, and to work hard as a child to develop these skills often quite often needs support from the parents. So I think we have a lot to do in trying to tell the parents from different parts of our society what a very big role they have in making opportunities for the child. We feel that it is sometimes very difficult to make the music accessible because it's quite stressy to learn an instrument. So if you don't have the support, it could be the same in the sport. You see the same in sport. So we have to work on the parents, and it's probably not a matter of cultural background. It's also economical. So economical background is also an issue when you talk about how to form the cultural institutions. Then libraries is of course one place where they don't need money, but they still do need a kind of overskud. They need a little bit more to go there, to enter the house. But I think the work with the parents and work with families is very important to open up the institutions.
Yeah, so I will go for the next step with talking about dilemmas. Since Nina, you're not talking so much.
I'm not
still
talking
trying
so
to find
much.
out a question for you.
Yeah, okay.
What dilemmas have you encountered internally in your institutions when it comes to,
Yeah, one huge dilemma, of course, is always to reach out to more people. Stockholm, for example, is a very segregated area and get more and more segregated. So the hard work that we at the museums or cultural institution has to work with is to get people from the suburbs, people that not, of course, had maybe not so, some of them have well-educated parents, but some of them not, and they are not used to go to a museum, for example, and they don't see it as a place for them. But I think that is also, of course, a kind of class, how do you say, class skillnad. So it's but we are working, of course. We have a lot of things going on. We have, for example, when you talk about children, we have something right now that called Mamma lär sig svenska, that we are collaborating with the church in outside Stockholm, and the mothers come to the museum and have a time with a good art educator who can work with them so they can paint and talk Swedish, while another art educator take care of their children. So this is one of the examples how to reach out to collaborate with people outside the museums.
Yeah, because now we are getting into a kind of another interesting subject, which is the kind of economical, less empowered people, where they don't see the relevance of art in their in the family or with their kids. Why should I put my kids to learn guitar or piano, where I hardly meet my needs end of the month? So how do you make it accessible to those people? How you make them understand that even though they are socially or economically backward, that art and culture is important for the development of the kid? Jamie, maybe?
Oh, wow. I'm not sure I'm best to answer that. I think that that you got me on that one. That's a challenge, and I think it is making yourself known, making it relevant, trying to find some way to connect to begin with. So, for example, in a library, trying to find a program that would bring in maybe that family, that would interest them, and then having the opportunity for them to see what else the library has to offer, and maybe for the children to be exposed to that. And also working with the schools, helping kids come to the library so they can see it, have a library card, maybe to the museums, have exposure to going to the museums. So bringing it in ways that makes it accessible if the parents don't do it themselves.
Yes, Susanne.
Yes, because always when we have some venues at the museum, if you have the whole family, if it's a good things for them, they will come, and of course it also should be free, because they don't have because it's there are maybe they are taking with him the grandparents, so it's very important that has to be for the whole family.
We just got a new Danish cultural minister, and she said that she had a dream that every child in Denmark should try to play an instrument at least 1 year at the school time. So that dream to bring the art, for my sake, music into the classroom and let the children, every child, play an instrument, and then try to show the parents that this could be an opportunity for your child to be there, and then afterwards try to find ways of group teaching and reducing the prices, giving free cards to those who don't have money, is a way to bring them in. But still there's a way to go, because we're working with a municipality just south of Barcelona. They've been doing this for 12 years to bring kids into music, because it has also very good development of the brain and the social behavior and things. And they try to work with the parents. It's very difficult to bring it out of the school time into a lesser time, of many reasons. But we are still working on it, and I think we're making progress, but it's quite a long journey we are on. And we have to change it for many people. Because for some of us, it was obvious that playing in our family, we play the piano, but it is not for many people. This is not something they do. So we have to work on it, and I think we're on the right spot, but it takes time, and we have to move money, we have to get new teachers, new skills into the institutions. As you said, we have to hire new people to make this happen.
At the same time, since you're running a music school, yes, okay, like for example, kids from the minority background, like for example, if my kid wants to learn tabla, would he learn tabla in your school?
Not if one child would like
to
learn.
But I'm just
saying.
But
if you had 10 kids want to play the tabla, I will do what I can to find a tabla player.
Because I'm quite sure that all your instruments are really Western instruments.
No, we have saz and we have dabuka. We have instruments, bagpipe. Don't mention the word. We have bagpipe. Actually, we had a beautiful story when we started this World Music Center 20 years ago. We had a young man in town called Cengiz, and Cengiz was a handsome man. He was, I think he was Kurdish, and 20 years ago. And then he had a saz, and we tried to, but then we found out it was difficult to get in touch with the groups in the society. How can we write or do something that they could recognize that there was something going on that they could participate in? And then we found out we could bring them in, and then there were some struggles between the Turkish and the Kurdish. So he was Kurdish, and the Turkish didn't want to come. But we managed to have scheduled a lesson, and suddenly all the parents came, and the grandparents, they brought in their lunch package and wanted to sit on a carpet in the basement. Whole Saturday you want to learn, and it was difficult with the money, so we had a lot of struggles. But we have SAS, now we have things, but we also have to maybe reform the way we are selling or using the time together with the teacher, because not everything is used to be or should be half an hour every week. It is probably a Western way of thinking. Maybe we should do something totally different. And we're working on that, but we're searching all the time. So if you have some kids want to play the tabla, we'll find a solution.
I will move to the more broader transnational perspective. And so this is a question to Jeannette. How can the transnational perspective contribute to a change of process in the respective Nordic countries? Of course, you can just talk about Denmark. I don't know.
When you say transnational, what do you mean?
It means in a more international perspective, if art and culture are more vehiculated in the international perspective.
And can you say that? Can you say it again? I'm not too sure I understand what you mean.
What I'm trying to say is, as an artist. Sorry. Sorry. what I'm trying to say as a Danish artist, even though you're local, you're Danish, how can, when you become known, how your international career is built upon from the Danish perspective?
Okay.
You answer my question, or is it still very vague?
Oh, okay. No. I mean, you're asking me how my career is, if it's built up on my Danish. Yeah, it's of course. That's where I'm based. So in many ways, I have that perspective, but I also broaden it out, and I draw very much on my international network, and it feeds me with inspiration, and I couldn't live without that. And also, it opened up for me feeling that my work resonated with someone, because it didn't resonate in Denmark in the beginning with anyone.
Exactly.
So when I started exhibiting and performing and whatever outside of the Danish borders, I definitely felt seen and understood, and of course also challenged, but I felt that I had an audience, and that really helped me a lot. And also like I said before, my international network of people, both artists, thinkers, activists, whatever, has been very, very crucial for my work and progress. So that's very, for me and for the things that I do, because it's a global issue, so of course it resonates on a global scale. It has been very, very important. And also, like, I also say that in the film that is shown somewhere, that actually having this critical friends group and this whole dialogue, and also coming together and talking about these issues in this region, how can we strengthen our visibility and our networks? It has really been also very helpful and very needed, because a lot of the times it's something you'll find allies or people that you connect with in the States, for instance, or in like not really in,
Closer circle.
but we are here, and we just need to connect, and that's also really what I strive for, that we have a strong connection in the Nordic region, but also in Europe, because there's a huge and long tradition of Black culture, for instance, in the States, which of course is what we draw from, and it's very inspiring, but we also need to connect here, and we have different experiences, even though the struggles we have come from the same source, which is the colonial project, but we have different backgrounds, different experiences, different cultural backgrounds. So I think that's very important to state, that it's great that we can connect here and be visible.
I think also this is very interesting, because this critical friends, when I heard the first time the group of critical friends and I saw the members, I said, wow, for the first time we have a counterbalance. Here that's exactly what's happening. It's challenging the existing very kind of cultural institutions which been sitting with their own privilege, and suddenly there's one group of artists, intellectuals, writers, everybody come together and try to have this counterbalance and give a different narratives in what we are trying to write as a history of a region. As exactly what Jeannette says, even though the struggle of colored people in this region are very recent, but we still get the power or the inspiration from people who have been oppressed for more than 500 years. So I think that strength is very, very needed. And I would like to know, as cultural institution, how do you see critical friends? Lars?
I think it's very important to open up the eyes for what we can't see, although we really are interested in the focus. I had one experience just a couple of days ago, we had a student, a female singer. She was also a songwriter. Her father was Turkish, and I think the mother was Danish. I don't know exactly, but I think it was a mix between Turkish and Danish. And she wanted to go to the Academy of Music as a singer-songwriter. And then she came crying to one of the offices in my office, and she said, "I can't go for the Royal Academy of Music because they want all the lyrics in either Danish or English." And then I said, "Okay." And the teacher was there. He said, "I want to write directly to the cultural minister." She said, "Oh, take it easy, take it easy. We just take the phone and call the Academy of Music. Say, oh, I think you have made a mistake." And he said, "What is that on our web page?" He said to me, the director. He hadn't even thought about it. That so critical friends open up the blind spots. Those we don't see because we have been in the business so long. So we are not able to, although we really want to focus on it. And I was lucky to have a critical friend. My former vice president from India, he was my critical friend all the time because he saw all the, when his children that was Danish, their mother was Danish, he was Indian, and they had a lot of struggles just riding the bus. So he was always opening the eyes for the blind spots. But although we still have blind spots, so it's wonderful to have the critical friends.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Does anyone wants to reflect on that?
Well, the book that we've launched has been launched
anthology,
today. He mentioned that there should be. Oh, thank you. Yes, that
Anthology.
reading groups should be formed around this book, and that is the work of libraries. Go to your library, form a reading group. Here we go. Let's get some discussions going, because libraries are rooms for discussions. So we need these critical perspectives to come in, and not just to just to be there, but to be reflected upon, to be discussed, to be shared, and to have different insights. And thank you. So that's what I recommend. Is we need this. We because we don't in libraries, as I said, we many of us come from the majority, but we need groups, like you said, to show those blind spots and to help us to open our thinking and bring those insights and those perspectives is very much needed. And so that it's a dialogue, we have a process of mutual influence, and we can, find the humanity in the other is very important. I think libraries allow for that, when you can come together face to face and meet and discuss on friendly terms.
Yes, Lars?
Yeah, I was just. We were doing some exercises in our European network about teacher skills, and we talk about the blind spots. Also, if you have the luck to have people with different backgrounds into your teachers' colleagues, you also have to find out where is the average that we can live with, because we could, I don't know if I'm offending somebody, but I think we have different way of seeing of time. Maybe it was mostly in the first group that came. We have 3 from Africa, some from Cuba, and when we talk about time, it's sometimes we talk about different things, and we have to work on cultural diversity in that part too. And then we have to find out if they don't read Danish and they have been here for 20 years. How could we communicate? How is the way that we can meet? Where do we find the average place to say that if you should be in this my institution, how can we communicate? And if we agree on we start the meeting at 9, is it 9 or is it 9:15 or is it probably not before 12? And then are we ready to take the consequences? If we several times have difficulties with it, are we? Because it's very difficult to fire a man with a different background because it's politically wrong, although he doesn't show up. So it's also critical, friends, in that way. How can we make the culture work for both of us, for both ways of looking at the same institutions? Or are we as managers ready to be clear in the demands of what is needed here? I'm sure for those who have been born here and taught here and are, in a way, I don't know, Jeannette, but I can see you probably see yourself as a black person, but I see you very white. I will never guess that you were black. in the way.
Really?
Yeah, but the way you speak, the way you move, everything. I've been with black people. They're totally different black than you are because they have
But
another
there's
way
not
of
one
culture.
kind of black.
No, that's why. That's also very important to be aware of when we're talking about this diversity.
Exactly.
And it's I think it's when we're talking about bringing in multicultural aspects, we also have to find where is our common level of what we can, how can we use each other, how can we trust each other, how can we make agreement, and we have to work on that because it's not always the same responsibility. For instance, on time, it could also be of reading mails, answering phone calls, and things like that. Maybe I'm talking about the first movers coming from different countries, but I have worked with that for 20 years, and it's been a struggle and also very funny, but it's also sometimes you really are working on it to make things work as a multicultural institution.
Yes, Martina.
Yes, I just wanted to say that I think when we talk about diversity, we also need to be very clear that there's not just one certain community and there's diversity also within communities or minorities, and explaining differences by culture is always a bit problematic. So I think we need a kind of cultural sensitivity to understand. Where are we dealing with culture and where are we dealing with differences, and not to try to fight the differences, but to actually embrace them and have this dialogue, which is also the point of this conference. But I would like to come back to what you were saying about kind of getting also inspiration and strength from an international context, because I'm not a critical friend in that sense. I am an immigrant in Finland, but I think this. Being in this position is very difficult to always be the critical friend who always says things nicely, and I think this international perspective in the sense of empowerment in this area is really, it's great. I think it's nice to hear that this has been a source of power for you. But when we're talking about institutions, and I think there's a lot of institutions here at this conference, please, internationality is not diversity. When you make an international program, you're not necessarily dealing with diversity. For me, diversity has really to do with the local context. Who are the people living and working in our local context, and how can we be inclusive as institutions? So to just not mix these things up, I think it's really important, and we need intercultural competences for that.
Yeah, that I absolutely agree with you, because not to confuse internationality with diversity, because often festivals or institutions, when they do programming, of course they invite several artists from abroad, and thinking they're doing something for diversity, but actually it's not, because the local artists are the people who are suffering from minority background. We are getting close to the end of this session. Is there any person from the public who would like to ask questions? Please go on.
No, I'm sorry. My name is Ruth Montgomery. I'm from Greenland. I first want to say thank you very much to the panel. That is the most important thing that I wanted to say, and for the moderator, and for your sharing of your thoughts. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, hello. My name is Sofia. I'm from Gothenburg Literature House. So I also thank you too, but for me this has been actually a very uncomfortable conversation. Yeah, I want to thank you, but I mean you have touched upon really a subject that is really for real, but sometimes I feel maybe I don't know, this comment just now from you, for example, felt a bit painful in the context of the art piece we took Kamara's art piece before. So yes, I agree we should be very sensitive and open also with the fact that this is difficult and uncomfortable.
I don't know if you can hear my blood is boiling.
Yeah, I understand. But so my question, which I agree with you as moderator, it's really hard to find the right questions sometimes, and it's very important that we try. And you said, like in the middle of the talk, that the curator is out and it's bad. You said like this, and I'm very interested in knowing more about this position, because I think maybe the curator is more important than ever.
Can I comment on that?
Well, yeah, but this is a question also for the panel and you. But you can also. I will send you the mic, okay?
Hello, my name is Martina. I'm a curator at Arketypisk Center in Lillestrøm. I have a couple of comments and just wonderings that maybe we can start talking about. My heart is also beating really fast in relation to the comment that was made towards Jeannette and the comments that were made about the approach of time. I'm also an immigrant here in Norway, and I've been a nomad for many years. Originally from south of Italy, and lived in north of Africa for some years. And I just want to say that for me, diversity is very much about that space in between people and being able to have freedom of expression and being understood. Doesn't mean you have to agree with everything, but just being understood is already a big privilege. And people that are engaged because of their diversity, they're not engaged because of being exotic in a way, but because of their experience and professionality. And all of you sitting here today are not sitting here because of your skin color, but because of your professional experience, which has nothing to do with your skin color or where you're from. So I'm not quite sure I managed to make myself very clear right now because, again, really fast heartbeat. But when it comes to the work of curators and to the fact that having free exhibitions means lesser quality, I have to very much disagree on that. At Arketypisk Center, every single one of our programs, which includes all sort of ages and groups, also hospitals and psychiatric clinics, is completely free. And we have a huge amount of public, much higher than institutions in Oslo. And I don't think it has to do with the fact that it's free or no. It has to do with how much it can resonate or what type of dialogue it allows. If it's contemporary enough to what's going on at the moment. And as a curator, this is my personal approach to the work. It would never be to judge people up or down, but it's to allow discourses, and to curate is originally in Latin to take care of. So it's to take care of communities, it's to take care of artists, is to use art as a tool within society and to allow for that to happen. And Norway is extremely privileged to have art very acknowledged within society, and it's a great platform for being challenged and bring that forward.
Can I respond? From the work that I've seen going on in some of the museums, too, it's about ensuring the curators, I see them working to ensure that people can represent themselves and be represented in the ways that they choose, not being represented by the institution. So it's bringing the people in to say, okay, here's who I am, here's how I want to be represented in the collection. And if I understood, I think that's, when we talk about curation, caring for that dynamic, to be aware and cognizant of that dynamic, that's a power shift. Say, okay, you represent yourself, you have that power. We will not represent you. And I think it's a big shift that I'm seeing. And that's that shift of power that I probably don't articulate well, but that's what I'm talking about, is that shift from being represented to representing one's own. Yeah. So,
Any other questions?
Hello, my name is Mercy Nabiri. I'm from One Dance UK in the UK, and I'm the head of dance of the African diaspora. We've just recently, well, I just want to thank you so much, and also the first conversation that we had was really inspiring, and also this as well. It's bringing up so many ideas, and also just to compare what's happening in the UK as well as here. So, and more so because 2 weeks ago, we just finished the conference, the international conference, which was on dance and the digital space. And it's very much this kind of conversation that we have. But this conference that we do every other year, we do it in partnership. And we do, it was initially brought in to bridge the gap between academia and practice. And so my question to you, the institutions and the arts, or the artists, at what level do you start collaborating and having that conversation? Because when we connect with the partners and we choose the partnerships, it's very telling. For instance, if we're putting something in a venue, it's very obvious as to how the result will come about from the get-go. If we don't have that partnership at the very, very early stages of putting the, having that conversation at the very beginning, then we realize that there's so many difficulties that come along, if we just parachute something or the venue people to come in. So at what level do you usually connect with the artists and vice versa?
Anyone wants to do?
Does anyone else have anything to say? I feel like I'm dominating the conversation a little, so stop me if I... I think that's a very, very good point, and that's something that, at least in the classroom, I'm working with my students on to reflect on. Do we bring people in, and is this something where we work with a group and say, okay, together we will decide the aim of this project, and we will do this, this is working with the institution, but it's your ideas and we will help make that happen? Or is it more that we have this idea, come collaborate with us and help us fulfill this idea? That's a little less of more on the institution, the less of the group, right? Or is it, hey, could you contribute a few things to this project? Maybe some, some quotes or maybe some artifacts or whatever it may be, and that's then to a lesser degree. So I think that what you're getting at really is very, very relevant, is at what point do we bring people in and in what way? And is it with sort of back house functions? Is it stuff that's happening, for example, with the collection? Or is it the museum collection or the archive and the library? Or is it happening in the front, like with programming and exhibitions? How are we bringing people in and in what ways? And that's something that whenever we start a project, we really need to look at. What are we doing, and how much power are we sharing?
I would also like to comment. I think it's a really important point, because many times especially when we're talking about programming, just by asking the question, we are already defining the answer that we will get. So we are not actually ever getting anywhere, because we're just in our comfort zone and we're just asking what we want to hear. So if I'm a theatre and I want to make a musical with a Somali girl as the main character, then I am already going wrong. This is, and this is a concrete example. I didn't make it up, but it's kind of, if you're interested in the life of a Somali girl, then you need to frame your question a little bit different. I think it's really important, and for me it goes always back to. We need to, and now I use this word, we need to decolonize the arts institutions. We need to get the diversity into the institutions so that the questions are asked, or different questions are asked, questions that we don't know yet. And we need to revisit our practice. How do we do, what is a museum, what is a theatre, what is an art school, what is a library? We need to question these concepts that we have to be able to be open and relevant. I think this is really important. To whom are we relevant? And we don't know yet. So we need to break down the concepts. We have to let in the openness.
There's one.
I think there have been a few here actually before. And
Yeah,
this
I
one.
think.
So 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, so it's you. Hi, my name is Selma. I work at the library here in Oslo, a small library, as an event manager / programmer. I actually challenge my colleagues, my leadership at the library, but that's the reason I'm here actually, because I spoke and told them we have to work on diversity. The word diversity, what does it mean? Because I think it's such a big word. I feel we have only spoken about ethnic diversity, not the LGBT community, not disabled people, etc. No, when we say ethnic diversity, do we include indigenous people, etc.? Like Oslo is the city in Norway with the biggest population of Sami people, but do we actually include them? Do we see them, or are they invisible? And I feel like I can only speak for Oslo, that we live in different bubbles, the institutions live in different bubbles, we do our stuff, and we don't see what's happening on the other side of the city. Like, I feel that Mela could work more with the museums, etc. Why doesn't the institutions collaborate more? I work with programming, and who are we doing this program for? And when we speak about diversity, you said ethnic diversity. Okay, what do we mean? I agree that it's not only one group, and even if people have the same genes, it doesn't mean they have the same taste. And one group that I feel we forget most of the time are young people with minority background, because they don't feel any relevance, or the programs are not relevant to them. The Norwegian programming are not relevant, and the programming made for the first generation is not relevant. So I can just give you one example, and then I'm going to finish. I'm sorry if I'm taking too much time. I was so surprised. A month ago, I went to this event called Black History Month. It's the first time they did it in Oslo, in a small pub. And for once, okay, I'm always the only person in the room looking like me, but that time I was the almost only person in my skin color, and it was so beautiful. The room was packed with young, beautiful people from the African diaspora, and they were talking about really, really important stuff. It was difficult for them, but they felt safe at the same time. So I invited them to come to the libraries, because I work at the library, and read about their history, because they were talking about why is the situation like this? Why? And I said, read about your history, your ancestors, etc. But if you don't ask the libraries to give you the right books, you won't find them there. You have to tell the institutions what you need, because they don't know. And to finish, this was on Saturday. On Monday, a young girl came to me and said, I heard what you said on Saturday, and I want to borrow some books. And she ended up borrowing 8 books about her ancestors' history and her ancestors' language. So my point is, working in an institution, don't just stick around in your office. You have to get out, ask people, and ask people of all generations, because first, second, third, fifth generation is not the same if you talk about ethnic diversity, but also don't
forget about all the nuisance. Yeah, sorry.
So I'm really sorry that, thank you. I'm really sorry that we are running out of time because I got the last 2-3 minutes with my panelists were fantastic. And then I'm extremely sorry for the question. So my last question will be, just to wrap up, if this kind of participation in conferences provide the real change. So 2 minutes, then we are done.
Definitely, I think these 2 years where the art museum has been gathering, it has been very, very rewarding, and we have done small changes. We have done exhibition space in the art museum, and I think both for staff and audience and artists, it has been a good experience. Yes.
Oh, I have much. To be honest, I don't know. I mean, for myself, it's a way of connecting with people that I find inspirational and can collaborate with. And in that sense, it might help something, but I don't know on the broader sense. I'm not too sure. I think there are a lot of conferences all the time around these issues. And I don't know, how it has impacted. No. Mm-mm. It's also an industry in a way, you can say.
Yeah, it is.
So that's my answer. I don't know.
Thank you. Martina?
I would love to be optimistic, but I see it a little bit like you. We are getting on far too slowly in this issue. We have conferences like these. This conference has probably cost a lot of money. It's wonderfully organized. There's an app and everything. I hope this is a positive sign that at least the Arts Council of Norway is wanting to invest in diversity also in the future. Hopefully also the other arts councils in the Nordic countries. And this is a beautiful publication. Thank you very much for everyone involved in this. And I'm not diminishing the value of this, but it's not the first. There's books out there. It's really up to us. We need to do the work, and we're a creative sector. We need to do better than we have done. We need to come up with creative solutions to solve this problem. So it's really up to each single one in this room. There's no other reason. So I also don't know. It's possible we all leave and say, oh, this looks nice on my coffee table, and nothing happens. It's really up to us. We need to get going. We need to do better than we have until now.
Thank you. Nina?
Yeah, of course, I agree with you as well, but I think at least it can bring some power and some inspiring to work on with these problems. But when you work in a big institution, I'm not the one that have the power, unfortunately, to anställa människor for at least, but I can of course inspire my colleagues and give them the book, and maybe they read it and we can discuss it. So hopefully it can bring something for my institution to get a change, even if it's it takes time, of course.
Jamie?
I see for libraries that we talked about, there are things happening in libraries, and I'm happy about that. And we're still learning. We're still trying to understand our role and trying to explore what we can do. It's not complete, but we're working on it. I see very much that this exchange that we've had in the network has been very valuable, and a lot of people come away from that. I also see that we have to continue to ask ourselves critical questions. What are we doing? How are we supporting our communities? Are we supporting our communities? Are we neglecting anyone? Are we truly being inclusive? That's something that we continuously have to ask ourselves. It's not something that you can just achieve and say we're done. It is a continual thing. And so today I think I've had a lot of great inputs that I will bring into both, because I teach, into the classroom. So the up-and-coming librarians and library directors, I hope I can bring some of these questions, some of these points in so we can really reflect on them in the classroom, but also within the network that I've been involved in, that we continue to circulate these questions. And that's the important thing, is that the network continues so we can continue with this, to continue to do the work and hopefully bring about some changes.
Lars?
I think it's very important to share and to see what we are doing around. I think the network is very important. We have had a lot of good things to come to see what's going on, both in this network and other networks. Otherwise, it's very difficult to find new solutions if you're only looking in your own neighborhood. So it's nice to have these conversations and to see what's going on in the world, because it's changing very fast these days. So we need to work on it, and it's very inspiring, I think.
So with this, we're gonna end this very good, interesting session. I really thanks the panelists to be patient and to answer the questions. Some of my questions might have been little not up to the level you might expect it, but as I said, it's always difficult to ask questions. So I hope that, as you said, this session will bring some changes, but even though it's not bring some changes, at least to have a self-reflection on ourselves and also our institution as who is bringing the change, and also as artists who are part of the entire change. So I really hope that you enjoy the session, and please participate the next one, which is coming soon, I think after this break. So thank you very much.
Yes, yes, yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Hi, everybody, and welcome to a sustainable, diverse art cycle in the Nordics. Just before we start, I want to clarify that I might say cultural cycle, because in Sweden we use the word kulturella kretsloppet. So in case I say cultural, or if I refer to cultural cycle, it's the same thing we're talking about. It's not a different topic. I feel like I've given 500 presentations of myself today. But my name is Ninos Josef. I'm a professional dancer and actor from Sweden. And I'm also a cultural political consultant and strategist, specializing in organizational development and analysis and diversity. And I'm also a critical friend. But today, or right now, I'm going to be the moderator of this panel, this fantastic panel of 7 people. We would have been more, because they were like, just add people. But I think 7 is a great number. And we can start over here. And I'm thinking maybe it's better if you give a presentation about yourself shortly. Maybe that's always easier.
Per Odd Bakke. I work at the National Museum. I'm a trained nurse, but I'm also an artist and now museum man for like 10 years, working with as a special advisor, working with diversity questions and recruiting, and has been working with the national touring exhibits as well for the National Museum.
Yes, hello. My name is Maija Lummepuro. I work as a senior ministerial advisor in cultural affairs at the Ministry of Education and Culture of Finland. And I have been working firstly with international cooperation, mainly bilateral cooperation with Russia, and then also regional cooperation like Barents Euro-Arctic Council and also the Northern Dimension policy. And now for a few years I have been also working with diversity issues and integration policy. So in brief, like that.
Hi, my name is Miriam Haile. I am happy to be here. I was invited through Thomas and Critical Friends. I'm a visual artist, and I work in Agenda X as a director for cultural activities, which is a youth department in Anti-Racist Center.
Hi, I'm happy to be here too. It's a really interesting panel, and I don't know anyone from before. That's a really good thing. My name is Sunniva. I work as an associate professor in music at Queen Maud's University. So I'm educating the future kindergarten teachers. But here I think I'm here as a representative for KILforsk, which is the researcher group that is following the group of cultural music and art schools that work for inclusion or art as an inclusive power in the local communities. Yeah, and I play accordion.
Fantastic.
So my name is Anusha Andersson, and I am here because I am founded an organization called Historieberättarna, Storytellers, that is working for and with children and youth regarding mostly projects that takes up the subject about inclusion and integration. But I'm also on leave from my job as the coordinator of development through culture in the municipality of Botkyrka in Stockholm, because I'm studying my master at the the University of Art in Stockholm. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you for coming.
My name is Alexander Montgomery-Andersen. I am, maybe in this situation, I'm first a critical friend and representing Greenland. I also am a co-owner of a dance studio in Greenland, and I work as an independent artist and also produce both festivals and dance performances.
My name is Osiel Ibáñez. I serve as Strategy and Development Manager at Stockholm University of the Arts. I have a broad experience from the performing arts field as a programmer, producer, and communications manager. And today I'm back to where it started, at the Stockholm University of the Arts, where I graduated 15 years ago.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining us. We're going to talk about the cultural cycle, and the panel, well, most of the panel will be based on the editor's note in this amazing publication, where I wrote the editor's note that touches the subject of the diverse cultural cycle, or the non-diverse cultural cycle, I would say. But before we start, I want to clarify the term, the cultural cycle. In Swedish we say kulturella kretsloppet, and that is the circular journey from one's first encounter with the arts and culture through its lifelong capacity of access and participation to its recycled infinity. So basically from the beginning until the end. And we're going to try to touch all of those things in between. And we're going to start at the arts and cultural schools and also the independent cultural organizations. And there we also need to clarify that in Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and other Nordic countries, we have Kulturskolan, which is the arts and cultural schools. But in Finland, for example, they have a different system where they work with music schools and mostly genre-based cultural schools. They don't have the umbrella organization that we have in the other Nordic countries, and I think that is very important to distinguish so that we don't have people misinterpreting what is being said. And I want to start with Dr. Sunniva, because the first proper stop in the cultural cycle is the cultural school and the independent cultural organizations. And would you say that the structure of the arts and cultural schools in the Nordics allow children to participate on an equal level?
The short answer is no.
Okay.
Yeah. You want me to elaborate?
I would love for you to.
There was a report that is the premise for knowledge that was sent to the Department of Culture, or the Department of Education, not long time ago, that states that there is an overrepresentation of, or there is an underrepresentation of boys, underrepresentation of children that comes from low-income families, children that comes from immigrant families, children that comes from families that have immigrant background. So that means that the cultural schools are not reaching students on an equal term. And in the discussions that we've been having, or that have been going on, both within KILforsk, the researchers that are included in the cultural school project, and how the cultural schools discuss among themselves. One of the things that has been like the huge cry from the schools is actually for those ones that were at the discussion, the panel that was in Teatersalen here, the same as the institution said, we have a lot of projects for reaching these students, but we don't manage. And we've been working with this for 20 years, 30 years. We don't really succeed, not in a really sustainable way. And then so that's been the department of, or that has been the point of departure for the discussions. But I think the solutions that are discussed is maybe I have two maybe points of reflection on that from the KILforsk project, and that is I'm not sure that many of the cultural schools or the higher education representatives actually go to the students or the low-income families or the children that come from families with immigrant background, or the boys, and ask, like, what can we do? How can we be attractive for you? It has been done, but not in a systematic way and not in a structured way. And I think also that's one point. And one other point is maybe also coming from the because it's all white. In KILforsk and in the KIL project, it's all white. So there was a discussion like how can we do something about this? And one way that was done was that 2 people from Critical Friends were invited. I know that they were invited for one seminar, and it was interesting what happened because they asked different questions to the leaders in the cultural schools, and it was some moments of quite tensed confrontations, because then it comes to those moments that are uncomfortable, because you actually, like Kamara Joff was saying, those moments of uncomfortableness comes in between of guilt and of self-defense, and the responses were everywhere on that scale. And I'm the anthology that is gonna come in June, I think, that is the research that is coming in from this project. I'm very excited to see if we can manage to say something profound about this, because I don't know all the projects, but I have really good hopes that maybe we can say something about what is happening, what is done practically, and maybe why.
Thank you. For those of you who are not familiar with the arts and cultural schools, or kulturskolorna as we say, they are organs funded by, most of the time on municipal level, sometimes on regional level, but also in some very rare cases also on state level. And they are supposed to bring culture or make culture accessible for every child in the Nordics or in the countries, in the specific countries. And we're going to pass on to Anusha. You have decades of experience in working with cultural projects regarding increased participation for children and youths, and both on municipal level but also on grassroots initiatives. Can you tell us a bit more maybe about Historieberättarna, the organization that you founded?
Yes, Historieberättarna or Storytellers is a non-profit organization that I founded in 2015, and I did it after for 10 years I was working as a film educator in school throughout Sweden, and I could tell that in the classes, it's in Sweden, I'm sure in Norway and Finland, Denmark as well, or for Greenland is. The classes are huge. It's huge groups. And usually you were out working with a subject like environment or identity or gender. And you were supposed to create like 10 films or something in that class. And you can tell that it was always, it was a quite big group. Film is something that is usually interesting, but it's always the pupils who kind of was in the gap, like they really wanted to just write or really just wanted to play, like create music or illustrate. So I started to ask the people who was giving me the jobs, could we start to work in another way? To just could we start in a more like individual, like trying to see the person and the individual and unique interest that person has. And usually it was quite hard because, most projects need a result. So then I founded the organization Historieberättarna. It's a non-profit, something I did like an extra thing, and then suddenly that work increased, or the organization has increased, because I think that the key has been that when you start to letting the participants themselves in one way and decide for themselves what they want to do, or how they want to express themselves, in which culture expression they want to use, it gets it's been easy to actually get participants to come, and usually they come from the free will. It's not something they need to do. So that's been the foundation, and then we have worked a lot with. We've been founded for projects regarding inclusion and integration. But I just want to say that the one thing that has been important in the work with the Historieberättarna, but also in my work in the municipality, has been that you can't participate in an activity, or you can't apply for a job or education that you don't know about. And if the possibility to participate in a cultural activity or is like uneven distributed in the region or in the city, I would say that the own understanding in how you can participate is just as uneven. So, and I think we all agree on that everybody should be able to work in the cultural field if you want to participate in somehow regarding where you live or where you come from and so on. So I just also wanted to say that talking about the circle of culture, I also talk about the physical circle, because usually when you see a child or a young person, when they come in the circle of what I call culture, like it could be like something like a film screening, something easy. Usually they kind of stay if you suggest new things. Then maybe they will start to be attending that film workshops and so on. So what we really need to do is just widen that circle, and also understand what to put in that circle to make it get like wider, so everybody feel that it's something that is also interesting for them.
That kind of answers my following question, because I was wondering, because as we can see quite a lot of the times, a lot of these projects regarding diversity or inclusion, somewhat they manage quite a lot better than the institutions. And I wanted to ask you then, what implementations do you think the arts and cultural schools or the independent cultural organizations can learn from grassroots projects to implement in their own strategies to reach a broader audience?
I think they have everything to learn, and I think they have to work much, much closer, and also give the mandate to grassroots organizations to kind of, I think that you can find different kind of ways of changing a structure in an institution, but one way would be to actually like allocate the fundings in another way, and create long-term like work in co-creation with the grassroots organizations for a long term. Because the problem is that I think that it's so much information and knowledge that the grassroots organizations have, and maybe sometimes they're invited for a conference and they can express it, but for the long term you lose. It's like a gap, and then you reinvent the wheel again, and a new organization, or maybe the same, is given new fundings, and you do the same thing all over again. So I think I would like the institutions to invite the grassroots organization much more, and to really also learn about not only the good examples, also the things that didn't work, because the institution has the structure, the funding, and the muscles to work for that sustainability, but together with the grassroots organizations.
Thank you. Miriam, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to it, because I'm sitting on 2 stools today, because I'm also like a visual artist doing more like collective works, but I also work in Agenda X, which is also a grassroots project now, although it's existed since 1998, so it's going on like 20 plus years, and it's for youth from 13 to 26, and we do get fundings from different stipends, but a lot from the Art Council, and it's a huge network because it's diverse youth. It's under anti-racist centers, so it's obviously many of the youth that's not necessarily represented. We use art and culture and creative projects to empower. So that empower, there's a duality then that that in the society, the way Agenda X started was for people who felt that they didn't have a voice, they didn't have a space, they didn't have a power, They came together, 20 years old, a group of young people, and said we needed a safe space because we're experiencing loads of racism, loads of exclusion in the Norwegian society at the time, and then we needed a space. And then it built from there, but now there's so much knowledge in that platform. And I'm just new, so I'm just entering it as a new person. But there's so many super cool, diverse artists that's been hired there. And one of the methods that I feel like that the institutions can learn is that some of the methods that Agenda X uses is that you have to have the network, and the youth are supposed to also resonate with you. So the person, and they do like, we do loads of art projects and workshops, short-term and long-term. But that sustainable long-term muscle that Agenda X has is the community aspect of it, is the safe space, is that the youth are empowered and they get to decide whom they feel should be hired as a short-term workshop holder. And that's usually an artist that work with themes that are relevant for the youths. And these are diverse youths, so there's diverse themes then. Okay. And that's one method that works, but also about bridging the gap, because it's about that they should have their own voice. Also, I mean, in the art world we say young, but it's obviously young adult because it's up to 26, and you're young in the art until you're retired-ish. But it's so there's another aspect where they are going from not necessarily being professionals, and then when they get to that space or that notion of having established a voice, then they meet the institutions and they're not included and the doors are closed. So that gap needs to be bridged, but then then you have to be recognized. So the grassroots and the volunteer platforms are crucial, and we sit with loads of knowledge, and there's a huge network, and we're visible, and we've done the work for you. So please, just hear us.
Cool. We're gonna because Dr. Sunniva also had a.
Please don't call me Dr. Sunniva the whole time. It's just
So
it's pleasurable the first or I should maybe have the pain of carrying my privilege in this case. I just wanted to add on what they were saying, because I think those cultural schools that have succeeded within those stories of success that is within KILforsk when it comes to reaching those students that are normally underrepresented, they come in the cases where you have experimented with methods of teaching and like short-term, long-term hiring, and where you take methods of education that maybe comes more from the grassroots organizations that don't have that institutional structure that is binding them too much. So I think also to look at the grassroots organizations for some ways of learning for the institution is quite crucial.
And if we go back to the main or a major question in this, what do you guys think is causing the poor participation in the Nordics for children with foreign backgrounds when it comes to arts and cultural schools and the cultural sphere in general?
Wow.
Anyone is up for grabs.
Can I start?
Yeah.
Okay. So we've been the past year we've been doing a lot of lobbying. We've been invited into a lot of these VIP closed-door meetings with municipality, the art councils, Nordic Network, and also not just arts. We've also been in more like with schools and sports and how to recruit parents and libraries and just the whole thing. And what strikes me as interesting is that this question comes up. Why? Where? How? And money is a huge issue. That was one of the repetitive sort of themes seems that money is obviously a huge issue. When things cost a lot of money, you lose the people who don't have it, the families who don't have it. Obviously, there's also a lack of inclusion in some of the, for example, the kulturelle skolesäcken. I don't know how to translate that, but it's sort of like
cultural school bag.
Bag, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. That is quite interesting also to see like what is taught. Is the program diverse? And what does it mean? Okay, so you have music. Okay, fine. You have visual arts. You have fine arts. You have performance. But for example, in Agenda X, we have loads of people. We have a music studio, and there's loads of different genres of music. That's not in the cultural school bag. So genres like rap, spoken word. We have electronic music. It's not necessarily. Well, I haven't seen it. So, and I think also with when it comes to, for example, theater and stage, we also have a stage. There's loads of more open frames of what qualifies as, in a way, I would say, valuable art, because it's also about value. Art has this thing that we're supposed to accumulate wealth, but it's also about value of whom gets to say that this is relevant. So I think also you lose a lot of youth if you say that opera is the only form of stage performative dance. But then, okay, we have a lot of youth that works with African contemporary dance, but that's not necessarily taught in the Nordic school system. And then, you know, there's also there's another political question of, okay, whom gets to say that this art is relevant? If it's for everyone, is it by everyone?
Okay, perfect. I know both of you guys wanted to leave a comment, so we'll start with Anusha, and then we'll move on to next question.
No, I just want to say that I think that we're talking about that we need to change the structures that how institutions are working, and that you can say that, I mean, if you have been working for one way for a very long time and still didn't reach that new participants, you have to change that way and maybe start to work in a totally different way. And this year I wrote a pre-study for the city of Malmö in Sweden regarding development through culture. And we could see that sometimes you reach like a group in an area where you want to reach, or specific kind of participants. But usually what happens is when a grassroots organization has reached that group, the institution take that group, and it's the same individuals that are in every project after that. So you can say that you had participants from this, the target group that you wanted to reach, but it's the same people. And you can also see that the people that you don't reach, nobody reached them. So it's still, and that key, like I'm not saying that, you know.
You're touching my following question is because I wanted to ask, because we're talking about how the arts and cultural schools and the independent cultural sphere have a very specific and very narrow-minded and limited genres that they're offering, an offering of genres. And would you, because this is also then becoming a problem, because what if they would take over all these genres that you guys are working with? Do you think that would result in a backlash, or do you think that there may be a possibility of cooperating together, or you know?
Do you talk about participants or the youth or the
youth? Yes. Yes, we are still at the cultural, the first step.
Yeah. No, I think that is how also the grassroots organization has to start to work much more. Also, and I mean, this is a tricky question, because you come, even if you're a grassroots organization, you have the power. When you meet the youth, you are the one that comes with the funding, so maybe a mandate or the power. But you have to be very flexible into totally maybe change a project that didn't work, and really learn how to listen in, but then also giving them the youth maybe positions, or also allocating fund, like trying to also do things. Maybe it won't work out, but it will be giving you something. Yeah.
Sunniva.
Yeah, I would just want to say that there's been some studies on what the students want in these institutions. And they say that we don't want long-term, that we have to engage long-term, that we have to kind of sign up for a year. We want small projects where we can go in and learn to play piano maybe for 2 months. And then the institution says, but our structure, that it's not rigged for that. So and we can't employ people like that, and it's so the structure doesn't answer to the demand. That's one way of seeing it. And then they say we don't see, for example, if you're a POC student, then you say some of them say it's not relevant for me. There's no one like me there. So how can I don't think this is for me. And I think when the students say such things, it's exactly what you're saying. Like if we don't allow the students to take over the democracy of how we rig the structure, then maybe we will not achieve what we want to achieve.
Sorry, Alexander.
Yeah, I have 2 comments to that. One being, I think the first thing is when a student says maybe, or as an example, if a student says, "Oh, that's not for me," then the next question immediately should be, "What is for you?" And if the answer is then, "Well, I want to play a sitar instead of playing the piano, because that is an instrument I have grown up with in my home," as an example, then that is maybe also an approach. Maybe it is, as you also kind of were touching in on, maybe it is within the dance. How many different genres do we have? Are we offering? Are we only offering classical, ballet, jazz, and modern? Or are we also offering other types of dance styles? And the other thing being, I also think is very important, is how young people mirror themselves in what they see. So if the only thing they see, or let's say young people will usually aspire to something, usually always aspire to, they want to be like an idol, or they want to be like someone they look up to, someone they think is exceptional talented within some certain field. But if a young person never sees a person with their same complexion getting to a level of artistic excellence, they will never put themselves, if a black kid never sees a black ballet dancer, they will never think, "Oh, but I can be that," automatically, let's just say it that way. It will definitely set up more barriers. So I also think it comes to a thing of representation within the arts, that there is representation, there is people who have achieved that place.
We're gonna touch on the field later in this cycle.
Yeah. But just to say how that really affects the lower level as well.
Representation matters, if anyone has ever doubted.
Yeah, just to touch on the subject of how to include the youth that's excluded or that is maybe not feeling empowered with the program, then a simple idea, which is ideas that methods that many of us are using, is to look at platforms and programs that are recruiting youth and where the youth are. Ask the youth, talk to the youth, use methods, social media. You can do open calls, and then you can also, basically look at, for example, if we talk about dance as a genre, there's loads of the youth are willing to pay also. So you see Substance, for example. It's so popular. Look at the popularity rate. Where are the youth? It's not that difficult. And then also, for example, if we talk about music, which is part of the cultural school. Okay, so what type of music are they listening to? And I've been fortunate to work, for example, with Electroloud. Electroloud is under JM Norway, and they work with how to get girls and non-binary people in POC and WOC people in music production to look at, okay, the music production was like 98% male produced, and we in Agenda X also recognize that we're not perfect. Our music studio was also loads of boys, So then, okay, then we look at Electroloud. Okay, they're working with, they have also methods, and they have a norm critical curriculum that they are willing to share with us. We're willing to collaborate. So just collaborate, because you're not losing anything as institutions when you collaborate. You're gaining, and loads of us and people way before us have done the work for you. So they have a curriculum how to teach norm criticism in music production for younger youth and the youth that are excluded in the norm, in the white norm. So I was just thinking, wow, they've already done such great work. Why aren't they not part of the cultural school bag? Because many of us feel that electronic music is not new.
Maija, we will take you as the last comment on this, and then before we move on.
Okay. Yes, thank you. Well, I was just starting to think about one very different project, but it was operated by children's cultural centers. In Finland, we have such centers which are financed by the ministry, and they have association which connects these centers. And they were realizing a project which was called Arts Testers, and it included the whole generation of pupils on 8th class, and they had possibility to choose two art performances, one from their own town and one outside. It could be, for example, in Helsinki or in some other city or town in Finland, and each class could themselves decide what kind of performance they would like to choose and to attend. And after that, they also prepared themselves before the performance, and after that, they were also exchanging their views on the social media and made some school work on that performance. And the idea was that each pupil on 8th grade, they could have the experience of art, and that they could also share it and either like or not like, but still that everyone could have this experience and could get acquainted with arts and culture, and in that way they then afterwards could maybe decide that was life-changing experience, or they are not interested in art. So that was like
Who's everyone? Sorry to interrupt you.
Yes.
How did you recruit? Like, did you count the youth that participated?
No. I mean,
was
the
it
project.
Diverse, or?
It was all children who went to comprehensive school on 8th grade.
So not the people that's not in the schools.
Sorry.
So not the people that's like out of the schools.
Now you're talking about the regular school?
Yes, absolutely
okay.
regular school. Yes, and
there's a load of diverse youth that's not in schools
yes.
in the north also.
Nordics. Okay,
that
yes.
we have to think about as well.
Yes, of course. But this was only one-time project, and now we will remain to be seen how it will be continued or not.
So basically, to conclude the cultural cycle and the need of what the art schools and the cultural schools are in need of is basically, like Alex said, an expansion of the genre equation that is being offered, and also new methods, or basically constantly renewing your methods, like a lot of you guys have touched, Miriam, Anusha, and Sunniva, like that you constantly need to renew your methodology in how do we reach people, because frankly we also need to speak about that. It's not only children with foreign background that changes, all children changes. So in order to constantly stay relevant, you obviously need to change your methods. And we're going to move on to the next step, because this exclusivity, as we say, and this pattern we can see on the majority of the professional art schools and universities also around the Nordic. And that is the next step of the cultural cycle, which means the higher educations. And here it's actually painfully obvious that there's a structural obstacle which results in the lack of students with foreign backgrounds. And Osiel, you are the Strategy and Development Manager at Stockholm University of the Arts. do you see a connection between the problem with early age stage exclusionary structure and the poor recruitments of students with foreign backgrounds at higher arts education?
Yes, there is a connection, and I could, in a more general level, talking about universities, broader recruitment is a general deficiency within the higher education. We have had very few progresses made during the last decade within this field. We see uneven patterns within recruitment that may have aspects of gender inequality or immigrant background, sexual orientation, disability, or religious orientation. So in general, universities and university colleges have difficulties in broadening their inclusion. And sadly enough for our sector, among the schools that have the biggest challenges within this topic are the art schools. Our university, for instance, the Stockholm University of the Arts, is the fourth most homogeneous university in Sweden, taking into account social background. We only have the Royal Music College, the Swedish Defense University, the military school, and the Stockholm School of Economics that are more homogeneous than us. So that's not very flattering. And of course, we have to address this. And it has been very also clearly stated by our students in a recent research that we have done now during this spring. We're working on a new strategy document for the next 4 coming years. And we have asked the organization from students to researchers to staff, also some alumni, some people externally, what should be the developing goals and aims for the university to take within the next 4 coming years. And the topic of a broader inclusion, about representation, is very clear. I would say it's the most clear demand that there is among our students. So even that's only one of the areas that I look after. It's going to be one of the main topics that we will have to address practically. And yeah, I've had to dig deeper, even though I have experience from working within these issues from the arts field. Now I have to look at it from a higher educational level. And there are recommendations to study. We have an authority for Swedish higher education that have done studies within this topic, because it is a requirement for universities in Sweden to work for a wider access. We're obliged to do that. But from there, the instruction is very open. So how much you do this and how you do it is very open for each university or university college to interpret by themselves. So therefore, we see a lot of different practices and activities and less activities. So it is a very important question for us, and the culture school is a very important bridge for us to see how we can bridge those students that find the interest at an early age to also discover that these are actually professions you can become, and that our school exists in the first place.
So a following question to that would be, what do you think is needed to reach? And by reach, I don't mean to attract, because by saying attract, we put the responsibility on the other person, and we remove it, and we dispatch it from the institution. So what do you think is needed to reach students, practices, expressions, and experiences of Black, Indigenous, and people of color and artists at the university level?
Well, in general, I think it is important to set up strategies for how to execute this work. And there are 2 terms that I would like to mention now, so that you can follow me. And it's widening access and widening participation. And it's not, this distinction isn't that established yet, but I'm trying to diffuse it so that more schools and culture schools look out for that. Widening access has to do more with the recruitment, about communicating, about having a broad range of students applying and also entering. Widening participation, it is what happens from when they enter the university or the school, and how you support them, even before, with having a clear communication and so on, with outreach programs, but also what happens while they go through their studies, and also having an idea about how to bridge over to the labor market as well. Because I think you have to, talking about cycles, you have to look for this whole circle. We also have studies that show, and this is generally speaking, not only for art educations, that students that come from a underrepresented group will have harder to also be established in the labor market.
And we're going to touch the professional field right after that. I'm gonna.
So I could mention more about strategies and the methods, but we can leave it for here now. Yeah.
Because we're going to have one comment and then we'll move on with the next question.
I just think that if we're not going to wait like 20 years for the whole field to develop, I'm not that patient. So it means that we have to jump in the circle. So it also means that we have to have some strategies for taking in students into the higher education they don't necessarily have the background that you would before you would require. And it also means that maybe, like there's a report in Sweden that has been coming out now. I know that Monica Lindgren has been one of the writers for it. They are suggesting that you can apply, if you're an artist, you want to work in the cultural school sector, you could take an education that is for 1 year, that is so that you don't have to go into the art schools to become a music teacher. You don't have to go into the conservatory. It means you can have your unique background with you, and you can add with for a year with pedagogy. And it also means that you're gonna get more diverse teachers. You're gonna get teachers that has been into the field as artists for a longer time. And I think that we have to look for those solutions that are jumping the cycle, because we cannot, it's not a cycle that you can break, and it's not a cycle that we are patient enough, and I'm not willing to wait for that cycle to kind of develop. It's going to take like 50 years.
Would any one of you say that there is a need of post-colonial structure implementations in art universities, perhaps?
Yes.
I think that's a very easy way of reaching out and making sure that post-colonial courses and studies are also a part of the curriculum, and not just as like pop-up courses every now and then, but that they're permanent and always there. I want to move on to Per Odd, because I want to ask you if you believe there's a connection between the way that cultural institutions are curated and their poor representation, and the demand of wide and Western expressions in relationship to the lack of diverse recruitment of art schools.
Probably, yes. That's a short answer to use well known. But there is, the circle also consists of a fourth part, which is the audience, which we haven't touched into it. But the cultural school bag, the cultural schools are also important in the context of educating audiences for the future arts as well. But there's definitely a connection, and we try to work. We have been for many years connected to the cultural school bag. We produce for them throughout the country, and we tour exhibits all over the country. And we also have an upcoming collaborative work with Kulturskolen in Oslo, the cultural school in Oslo, and in the forthcoming Viken, just to share that platform for professional art for students at that level. But it hasn't been so far too much of that, even though school classes come to the museum constantly. but there is a connection, yes.
We won't touch the subject of audience that much, because for me that's another layer of detaching the problem from the actual institution and making, putting it on the viewer or on the other person. I want to, as much as it's important, of course, but I want to move on to Miriam, because I want to. There's this discussion regarding poor recruitment in higher art educations in the Nordics going on, and a lot of inputs have been, especially from the different union organizations, have been that we need to secure the social and financial security systems for the practitioners first, in order to secure a broader recruitment on the art schools. And I kind of want you to break that myth for us. And do you really think that that is what is lacking in the structure within our art school institutions and the poor recruitment, and that which results in a white homogeneity? Do you think that the financial and social stability for the practitioner is what's leading the cause down?
You want to give me that question, huh?
Yeah.
Pension.
I'll take the challenge. Obviously, financial situations are relevant. We need to talk about that. But I don't think we should just skip past the power structures of hiring is important. Yes, you need to hire artists. Support your living local artists. But I'm also saying that that's fine, obviously, and we do that in our own ways in Agenda X, and we do that a lot in grassroots fields and platforms. But at the same time, we need to talk about the institutions, and I don't think we should skip past the post-colonial curriculum either. Otherwise, again, what's met when you are in the institutions, whether it's higher educations or the young youth whom are in the cultural school bag, having to go to see let's say, visit a museum and see an exhibition that is uncomfortable and can be violent and lack representation, can be disrespectful, and I know loads of youth who find also that to be extremely discouraging in terms of taking higher education. But then there's a whole circle there, because in Agenda X we the other department under Anti-Racist Center is Job X, and they work with finding work for the youth and work with CV and recruitment and prepping for not necessarily art fields, but just work, paid labor. And I also want to say that they could say a lot about what met with. Obviously, the method is empowering. That's what we do in Job X and Agenda X. So your background is something that you can use and add as an empowerment. But at the same time, you are met with power structures that don't see you as relevant. And I just want to say that we need to talk about institutional racism way more. And that needs to maybe be, in a way, the post-colonial fine, but the decolonial aspect is something different. We need to deconstruct before we can say, are we past the colonial legacy? And if we want to talk about power structures and museums and how do you get the wealth and accumulating wealth, do we feel safe inside them? What is we live in very nationalistic times. What is this? I was in a Bufdir, which was at the conference in Arendalsuka, where at a panel called "Is the School for Everyone?" And obviously, there was loads of organizations there who felt like just the general school is not for everyone, let alone art schools, let alone art the universities or art programs in universities. So in terms of work, all of that is part of a cycle, and obviously, working with art is somehow extremely difficult because of money, yes. But I also want to say that we need to also not be exploited, because Kamala touched on that today. With all these, you're seen as competent, you get included, but then not to be just an alibi for Mangfold, alibi for diversity, but to do you have power once you're hired? What's your role? What's your position? All of this is part of the cycle.
I want to pass the same question
and
to
they belong
Osiel.
Together, and we can only destruct them together.
Thank you. I want to pass on the same question to Osiel. What is the structure within our art school institutions lacking that results in white homogeneity.
Yeah, one of the aspects that you're mentioning is, and one of the topics that we are discussing now internally is decolonizing pedagogy, that go through the literature that we use, the guest teachers, the whole context that we educate within, and see in to what extent we reproduce a colonial heritage. So that's one aspect, and I also like that you mentioned the job recruitment activities, because that's what I mean with widening participation, to have a responsibility until the end, because it is quite sad what I mentioned, that two students from the same education with the same degree will have different opportunities to enter and to make a career, depending on what their background was before they entered. So there is quite of a initiative to manage there. And also about strategies, I can go in a little bit about some examples that should be done, because I think that maybe you can find your own similarities to institutions or to the independent sector of how to work widening your access. And it's about to firstly be interested in what your population looks like today. If it's your audience or your staff, what perspectives are we lacking? Because they are not the same for everyone. Even within our school, we have some programs that have very few male students, for to say, and then we have other ones with very few female students. So, and some of them are very come from rural areas, other are urban. So it depends very much within different institutions and education and art practitioners, what perspectives might enrich your activity. And why do you want to do it? From a higher educational perspective, it's very clear. For us, it's part of our quality perception that we need. Being in a research area, we need to have a lot of perspectives to be added into our mix, to be relevant to our future audiences, and so on. So for us, it's really clear, quite easy to understand why we must grasp it, and also then do a mapping, put forward the statistics you have. Some are there within the national statistics. You can find them, the gender, the foreign background, etc. Others you might have to ask and do a quantitative or qualitative studies around and see what perspectives, what type of outreach do we need to do before to not go too broad. And you say we need more representation. It's like maybe we're gonna ask for this, and then I know, this specific culture school project is doing it already. Maybe we should connect to them. So that's how you can be more precise in your outreach. That's one example. And also, of course, some of you mentioned, I think it was Anusha, where the youth are. Where are they? Being interested in that and go after those that can influence them. From study advisors, career advisors, schools, elementary schools, parents, minority group associations, so that really be interested in where the connections are. So and from there on put on an activity plan. So it's not that actually impossible to still try to manage. And of course you have to start at an early age and have some long-term perspective on this. But the sad part today is that most universities in Sweden, no matter what disciplines they are educating within, are doing too few activities around these topics.
I know Sunniva had a comment, but I want to ask if there's anyone from the audience that has a comment or a question regarding the two stops in the cultural cycle that we've touched upon so far. Do we have a microphone we can pass on? We can start with you behind here on the second one. Yes, here. You will get a mic. You can have mine, otherwise it's fine.
We only have a.
Hi, my name is Victor. I'm an artist, visual artist. Been in Norway for 18 years, long time. We are probably all familiar with the term, rather the phrase, one step forward, two step backwards. That happens quite a lot. But I want to bring about this elephant in the room, which everybody just dancing around. And this is the political agendas of different governments that we do get. The reason I bring that up, when I first came to this country, there was a very well-meaning project which facilitated education for citizens of developing nations. And then there was a barrage from the right side of the politics in the country, which kind of made the Arbeidspartiet a little bit nervous. So they too, because of wanting to win a momentarily vote, started pushing their agenda towards the center, then towards the right a little bit. That means excluding the diversity that's coming and invading this country. And my kind of scholarship that I came on is totally dead now. It doesn't exist. And politicians have made pronouncements, some of which have become agendas when they're in power. And that does have big influence on institutions that we are talking about now. And we are not talking about what they say, what they do. I was reading an article in NRK a few days ago. In Sweden, some politician is making a proposal that foreigners shouldn't be borrowing books from libraries. Hello? So those are things that we are just dancing around right now. You see, I was part of the Smithsonian Institute research group some time ago, and Donald Trump made such a huge cut. He decided to make such a huge cut in the funding for the arts, and there was a time they had to cut so many activities which were so essential to the life of the arts and culture of the country, just because some right-wing douchebag decides to do that. Because one feels threatened by the independent voice of the arts.
Ninos.
Thank you. You have a question also? Of course.
I have a couple of comments and thank you so much. The discussion has been really interesting. And my name is Ilaria Tucci. I'm from Italy, but I do live in Finland, in Tampere. I'm a theater practitioner and I'm part of the diversity agent family from Helsinki. I've been back in my previous life in Italy. I was really active with youth. I was working in several projects, so it's something that is familiar for me, this beautiful word. And yes, I encountered the same challenges in terms of involving youth. Really often there were like projects tailored for these kind of abstract stakeholders. So I do agree with you about the fact to go I would say to contact the key stakeholders and be in contact with the communities as much as possible to have a touch with what is reality, because sometimes projects are just written in a really abstract way when it's really important to have a touch with what happens in the field. And in this sense, I have a good practice example from Tampere. There was this really interesting project called Napuri Jurta in the neighborhood of Hervanta, which is it could be called a difficult neighbor, but actually is a really beautiful and diverse and creative neighborhood. They put a yurta, they put a tent in the neighborhood, and it was a place where youth people could go and meet, and it was really successful. And what they did was also to do art actions in a shopping mall, which is nowadays a place where youth meet. For me, as Italian, is completely. I would never think about, shopping mall, but actually among young people in Tampere, for example, is really popular. I would like to say something about the project that. Yes, no, that sorry, I lost the name. Anyway, that you were telling about the 8th grade, Maija, sorry. In 8th grade, in Finland is compulsory. I mean, is mandatory. So all the children in Finland actually, I mean, go at that time, at that age to school. So nobody is excluded because 8th grade, basically you're still going to school. So if there was that, I was just to clarify this.
But that's all over Scandinavia. Sorry to interrupt.
No. But it was. I mean, speaking about the Finnish example. So in Finland, speaking about the Finnish example.
Yeah, but there's also youth in Scandinavia. It's the same in Norway. It's compulsory. It's mandatory. But we work with loads of youth who still drop out and who are not in school. Not saying it doesn't happen in Finland as well. I'm sure it does. So we need to talk about.
I don't have numbers, but here the number I don't have, but
98% of the 8th graders participate.
But I want to say something critical about the Finnish system. I don't know about other Nordic systems. One is about teaching, being for example, it's so-called subject teacher in the Finnish system. So for example, I'm an actress. I have studied in the National Drama Academy, but for the Finnish system, it's not enough. Though I'm enrolled as a PhD student in a Finnish university, when it's about going to teach, I have to read from here. I need to get recognition, international comparability from the for qualification from a Finnish authority, and I need to pay 234 euros to recognize actually a degree which is even from European countries, not European country. So I think this is kind of something that should be changed because it doesn't make really sense. I do understand to take, for example, 1 year time to study again, and I'm fine with that. I think it's really important to understand the system you're going to work in, but paying to have a degree recognized is, for me, it sounds just unfair, because might be that I don't have those 234 euros to put in my extra education. Thank you so much.
The last comment.
Yeah, just hi, my name is Samuel. I'm from Stockholm, Sweden, dominating this room. The conversation. Now, just one quick question: how many of you work directly or indirectly that is funded by tax money of your projects? And then the follow-up question to that would be, because I was reading the question, do everyone who pay tax have the right to residence and representation within the arts? I think it's a really relevant question, and I think, what do you think is the mandate? Because we are in a Kulturrådet Art Council Norway funded, tax money funded event, and we need to elevate the conversation to that level of. So, because it's easy for us to talk about our organizations, the responsibility. We're good at organizing and talking about what we do on it, but the mandate of that tax that is making possible this, what doesn't it have mandate to include as many as possible? And what do you think about the mandate that that funds your works and your respective fields, and that mandate, and how do we perhaps hold that accountable? Because tax, if we all pay tax, then that means we all should be a part of taking back what we can get back. Yeah, thank you.
I think if I speak as an educator in the higher education system, I think that there, like it is now, we have to talk about two things. Why do we want diversity, or why do we want diversity represented in higher education? And I think that should be answered with the key speaker today, François Matarazzo, sorry, that said diversity is humankind. So diversity is. So the question is just whether diversity is represented or not. Like, are we represented? And in the higher education system, that is not a question. The representation question is not a question that is asked, either when you employ someone or when you recruit students. So then, because the higher education systems, they answer to this question, which I've been asking, both when it comes to gender and when it comes to different minority aspects or intersectional aspects, they answer, we have some quality requirements. And then my answer is, who's deciding the quality requirements? And they say, those are the requirements that we kind of all agree on in the discourse. So, and then my follow-up question is always, so your white privilege, how much is your white privilege informing that quality requirements? And how much is your white privilege or our white privilege sustaining those colonizing or painful, if I'm going to use Kamarajov's words, those painful structures? And why would those quality requirements be there if they cause non-diversity? And yeah.
So we're gonna touch, I know you had a comment on that also, but we're gonna move on to the actual professional field and representation, because even if the recruitment in schools, as we can see also quite a lot in the Nordics, the government and the state has literally pumped in millions and millions into these two stages in the cultural cycle. But even if the recruitments at the schools would be broader, and we would have a bigger representation, these artists will be met by a very exclusionary field. The Nordic Agency of Cultural Policy Analysis, also known as Nordisk Kulturanalys Norden, they released a report in 2017 called Culture with Different Backgrounds, which stated that employees with foreign background make up 15.2% of the workforce at state-funded cultural institutions in Sweden, 14.8% in Norway, 9.5% in Denmark, 6.7% in Iceland, and 6% in Finland. And I want to break this down because this report is also extremely specific if you actually get into it. Because also correct figures for Greenland, Iceland, Faroe Island, and Åland Islands are not presented, unfortunately. I'm going to break down the Swedish numbers, and it says out of these 15.2%, only 22% make up of people with foreign background from Africa, South and Latin America, or Asia, making the actual number of non-Western representation 3%. And I want to ask Maija, even though these numbers are not correct for Finland, but you had 6% in total in Finland, from a policy-making position, why do you think these numbers are so poor?
Well, question is, I'm sure it's really a difficult one, in that sense that we have strategies, and we have also systems how we have a dialogue with our cultural institutions, those which are state institutions and also our national institutions, and we have so-called performance guidance with them. So we have talks every year about their activities and how do they develop their work, and also it includes equality questions and also audience work and different
I'm going to ask
issues.
you, is there, because looking at the number and see that you try to follow up, is there some kind of evaluation on whether or not these institutions that are being funded by you are actually following the rules that you are setting, or are the rules not specific enough, perhaps?
What they do, the big institutions, starting from those who employ 30 persons, they make equality plan, and in that plan they have also very concrete measures which they should follow, and also themselves they are following up how they are fulfilling them, and they are reporting to ministry also. And then we have NGOs and third sector, which is applying for governmental funding, and there we also require that they make such plans, equality plans, when they receive operational financing.
Then I'm just going to ask another following up question. Then why do you think still the representation is so poor? If there are plans being made, clearly someone is not doing their job.
Well, of course,
I'm not saying this is you. I'm talking about
I
the
understand.
the field.
Yeah. I think that there is, of course, there is many reasons I can imagine, but also we are now we have had one project which is called Opening Project, where we have been one of our NGOs, Culture for All, and another NGO, Global Point. They have been making research how these questions should be addressed, and what are the main reasons why this is happening, that organizations are not recruiting people from non-Finnish and diverse background. And actually what they are finding is that in arts and cultural sector there is difficulties to find to be employed, not only with a diverse background, but also Finnish artists and cultural professionals have almost same kind of difficulties. So there is a lot of problems, and I think that resources is one very crucial problem, why it is so difficult to follow all those strategic goals and programs which we have.
I'm going to add a comment on that, and then we're going to move on, because as we have established, I think already today, resources are there. They're just not allocated fairly.
Yeah, well, the Norwegian situation in this situation is it's like every year we have a letter from the department following the budget, and there are always a sentence about diverse audiences. But as far as when I was in the management up until a year ago, there was nothing about diversity in staff, and we never report on diversity in audiences or staff. So there is no consequence for the museum whether we achieve our goals or not. That's
Did
simple.
someone take note of that? Because I also want to move on to the action, like to some of the practitioners. Alexander, you're a dancer and choreographer also. What do you think is the main obstacle for an inclusive professional field?
Main obstacle.
Or one of them. There's a whole anthology here. So
No. I think one of the things that is. Now I'll talk from personal experience. One of the things that is hit is if I get to a point where my art form or my presentation or pitch or whatever we want to call it is heard, then I am unfortunately often met with a sense of othering, a sense of, oh, but can you put it into this aspect instead of, oh, I just love your dance.
We're gonna, because I want to ask Miriam also, because we're very familiar that with the role of cultural institutions as imperial technologies of power, and there has been little to almost no focus on post-colonial history in these institutions, and also their role in upholding these systematic colonial expressions. And I want to ask you, Miriam, as a visual artist, why do you think the professional Nordic arts field is permeated with colonial structures?
God, you really give me the question there. Why the Nordic cultural art institutions are fused with colonial structures?
Yes, still.
Oh, good God! Because we have, as far as I know, I have an MA from the Royal Danish Art Academy. I was the only black student. The other downstairs, we had a heated debate as well. There was many in the audience that were professionals in the art fields, and many were in all white spheres and spaces. And the Eurocentric curriculum is very much alive. And I was lucky to work with a small group of artists, one who was here in Denmark. I was established there for a couple of years, where we wanted to talk about decolonialism, also to make an alternative curriculum. And many of these things it's possible to do it in the arts, but again, it's called alternative because we wanted to do it in the university, but it happened to be in the arts. So you don't really need to take diverse artists serious. That's my kind of like respond to it. But we need to talk about like power structures. How did these? What is the method? If you want to talk about like sustainability and of art cycles in institutions, then I worked with archives, for example, and it's quite interesting to see how these museums function. So we have to look at the history of the museums. What's the history? How do they come about? What's inside them? What's the curriculum? What's the artifacts? Whom is excluded? And I want to mention institutionalized racism, and not just racism, but also Victor's comments too, that we're living in very nationalistic times. Scandinavia and the North is very nationalistic. Is nationalism diverse? Are the policymakers today and the political parties and the people who vote for them, do they work in an inclusive manner? Like this representation, it's nonsense. Like it's absolutely nonsense. Like to be honest with you, I just also want to say that it is not just structural, but it's not just blind spots. It's also intentional, because people of power. I don't know. I'm not going to say why people feel the need to uphold the power, or why diversity is seen as something negative, because maybe you feel like you're lacking, or maybe like your power might be weakened. I'm not the one to say, but I will say that collaboration is very necessary. And today we live in a very white Nordic countries, and that's not inclusive. And I just also want to say that when it comes to I've been fortunate to work my way up, but I'm also an artist who are not funded. So I find other ways or means of survival. But I'm at the same time very highly educated, meaning that education is seen as competent.
You touched, because the last stop of the cultural cycle is the recycled infinity. Basically a place for those who will be remembered and whose art will long be recycled and preserved for history, meaning who will be remembered and who is the structure allowing to be remembered. And you were touching quite a lot about archives and museum heritage and stuff like that. And I want to ask Per, how will the exclusionary structure of the Nordic arts field affect our coming history, do you think, when we're talking about museums and this field and heritage?
Well, how will it affect the circle, the total arts circle? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you would look into the future, and how do you think the exclusionary structure of today will affect?
Well, the first one of those questions that you passed from the first row is when you come in as an audience as a museum, your world should have resonance in the collection, and it doesn't. That's one of the trouble that we see, which is a result of exclusiveness. And there's a connection between every signal that we send, every exhibition we send, passes down to the art academies, to the art schools, universities, and from the universities down to the cultural schools and the school system. So we have our part of the responsibility for signaling what kind of artists will we have. So there is this trouble, absolutely, and we have our share in it.
Could you say then that the actual structure of the cultural cycle in the Nordics basically preserves and upholds a colonized mindset or a colonized structure in what informing our coming future?
Well, yes, absolutely. There's no way, but we are aware. We are more aware of it now than we used to be, like 5 years ago or 2 years ago. But there is absolutely upholding the same structures, but trying to address and trying to reverse the burden of proof from individuals in the system who work for diversity up to the management. You know, we don't have to argue for why we need to have more diversity all the way, and they have to argue for why not.
I'm gonna.
Can I just say one comment?
Quick, and then we're gonna open up a bit. I'm going over time. If anyone wonders, I'm taking that privilege.
So I just wanted to say that I've been fortunate to work with the artists that is in the north, and that's have kind of like an artist collective, but also, for example, this counter narrative of what's in the museum and what's met with what type of history that's taught in the museums, because the museums are curated and the history is taught in a certain way, and it's Eurocentrist and it's quite racist. And but the problem is sometimes because rethinking Nordic colonialism was, for example, a counter narrative project, and it was an exhibition and by Tone Hansen and Kuratorisk Aktion. And also Dieter. I've worked with loads of artists who are trying to counter narrative and to enter the museums. Also worked with one like Jeannette Ehlers here, with also Temi Odomusu, who is a PhD professor, and she also made a exhibition in the colonial kind of like permanent exhibition in one of the museums in Denmark, where we kind of were part of actually like speaking back to the archives and try to kind of like flip the narrative so the audience would hear another voice that wasn't just, you know, the colonial pictures. So there's loads of ways, and there has been loads of artists who's working with this. But the problem is that it doesn't make it into, for example, curriculums. Also in the sometimes art can be sort of like a protective space, but the museums are not. But museums are for everyone. But higher art education sometimes is very, very exclusive, and I think it's important to see that a lot of these grassroots platforms and also critical friends and also different art networks, this could be curriculums that could counter what's in the museums. This needs to be archived for the younger youth. So we're working actually even now in Anti-Racist Center to be part of the Bymuseet and the City Archive, to say that if something happens, at least Agenda X was here for 20 years. So it's important to look at archives. I know Victor is also working with the archival project back home, and we've spoke a lot about this. The notion of archiving is important, and it's not hijacked by Europeans, because that's also another counter narrative that, oh, but you guys don't have the means to archive yourself. But whom is in the archives? And I also feel like the North and the white Eurocentric views are not the only ways of speaking and talking. And I also feel like it's important to look at what we have produced as artists and other art collectives as counter narratives, and they could be used as curriculums.
Definitely. I think it's a very
the
relevant
museum.
question to also ask who will be remembered and what is the structure allowing, or who is the structure allowing to be remembered. A very quick comment, and then I
Yes.
want to open up for at least 2 more questions from the audience
Just-
if there are any. No? Okay, they're
Okay.
giving me,
Okay, just a quick.
This is a bad sign.
Okay, just a quick
This is very bad, but a quick,
continuation of that train of thought, which I want to open up to ones within the Kulturskolan and the people who are working also within the higher educations. I know for a fact within the higher educations that there are outings where you go and see performances. You go and see, performances is there the same in the cultural school? Does anyone know?
No.
Kulturelle skolesekk i Norge så går det jo og ser
in Sweden also.
Yeah,
ser,
okay.
ja.
So, but then within that context, you are directly telling the kids or the youth what you are valuing. You are directly saying, this is valuable, go and watch it. And within that structure, there is a very definite power. That you are able to go out and say, go look at this is valuable. And if the only thing you're going to see now, on a dance perspective, if the only thing you're going to see is the Nutcracker at the opera, then we know that ballet is going to be the only thing that we're saying that is valuable, that is quality. So that is also just
I want to quickly finish up by saying that basically all perspectives that we have touched are represented in different chapters in this anthology, and the structure of the cultural cycle and the sustainability, the diverse sustainability of the cultural cycle, extremely important. I would say it's like when we were talking about the environmental kretslopp. I would say that the cultural cycle is just as important, especially when we're touching on the subject of diversity. I want to thank my fantastically fabulous panel. I think they're deserving of an applause. And thank you guys. Sorry that we couldn't take more questions. Shit happens.
Take them without the mic, you know?
Take them without the mic, outside, we're
Yeah.
here.
Yes.
Or, find each other on Facebook, network at the dinner tonight. Make sure that people implement diversity, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. There will be a wrap-up, a live-streamed wrap-up of the conference, I think, in like a couple of minutes, probably, live-streamed from one of the other auditoriums. If you want, you can, or I would suggest that you stay and watch it. It's the summary, yeah, a wrap-up summary of today. There's another day tomorrow.